Well, I don't think this is a great day for anyone, at least among the crew, but it is a
It's
great
the
day to
M1.
die.
It's a
Or
Monday. We're all drinking. It's that sort of day.
Well, there's other reasons for it. Hey there, everyone. The name's Adam.
I'm Imsit.
And I am Tech Priest, returned from my sojourn into the lands of Germania.
Is there a reason why you didn't join us in Shattered Nations?
The reason is that because I would have just gone into a gigantic rambling about Forsaken for the entire goddamn episode, and you would have hated me. Also, I probably would have had to spend a bunch of time looking into Werewolf the Apocalypse and trying to explain things. And there's probably some corrections that I could make about what was said, but really, I don't think anybody has time for that.
Yeah, fair enough. So, tonight, what we're going to take a look at by popular vote, it was a bit closer in our Discord, which I have linked in the description, but in the community poll, well, werewolves destroying the Roman legions won by a fucking country mile, and I don't blame you. I don't blame you. This is welcome to more dark eras. Forsaken by Rome. Where are my vampires, Varys? Where are my vampires, Varys?
Welcome to one of the best things ever produced by Chronicles, which is Dark Eras. And if this is your first time joining us, which I highly doubt it because our viewership is incredibly small, the quick rundown is that Dark Eras is a book about every kind of time frame you could want to run a game in, potentially.
It's a period
Including
piece
some
toolkit that helps the storyteller figure out what sort of chronicle they might tell if they wanted to do something different. Think of it as a
yes, it's
natural
great
evolution of the Dark Age vampire and werewolf that came about in Dark Age Mage. It's kind of an evolution of that.
Wild West Werewolf, Dark Age Mage, and Sorcerer, and then, of course, Victorian Vampire was another one along with Mage. That was the Old World. New World decided to do, well, this mostly, though, if I remember correctly, there's also a Victorian Lost book, which is quite good.
It's with Chronicles of Darkness with its loose canon that they're allowed to be a lot more creative.
I'd say more flexible because you don't have to go like, oh yes, Prince Mithras of London was highly involved in the whatever the fuck was happening to Lord What's in his face during the Great Anarch Rebellion of Who Gives a Shit.
Yeah, you don't have to, in this
There's
case, you don't have to worry about, well, the great Ventrue Elder, who was the companion of the actual antediluvian, was busy accruing power and trying to screw over his, oh god, what's the name of the zombies that the Giovanni ate? Cappadocians.
Cappadocians.
Yeah, he was working with like, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to give a shit about that. Instead,
Giving
this
us a
is...
wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Instead, we're
Sorry,
free.
giving us a wonderful, historical scenario of Roman werewolves versus German werewolves.
and it
Where are
makes an
my
excellent
werewolves?
point. This is sort of a soft update of Requiem in a few ways.
It's actually an excellent companion piece if you want to play around with other creatures that go bump in the night.
Yeah, Companions has a few other things that allow for a soft update, including an update of the whatchamacallem, the one Maquette bloodline that infects people that we
Oh yeah,
introduced
the
in Requiem, which is
Morbus.
fantastic. The Morbus, thank you. I was about to say it was a meme of some kind. It's Morbus time. Sorry.
Well, don't worry. We
That was
made a point to start the actual lore on vampires in video 3 of our Requiem for Rome because we had to go through the history of Rome.
to get to that point because well, the history of Rome is fascinating, and this is one of those periods that's very fascinating. It is the expeditions of Germanicus into Germania, which is the last real expedition beyond the borders that the Romans would do for a while.
It would be the last
There's the
time they tried to
campaigns.
push past the Rhone. It would be the last serious time they expanded northward, at least in the mainland. And it also is an interesting time because it is one of the first times they tasted serious defeat from barbarians, at least for a long time.
Right. It's more of a period where what they ran into and what they were expecting were very different things.
Also,
They did do a lot of damage, but the fact is that the Germanic tribes were much more unified than they had thought. One of the big reasons, for example, that Caesar's able to take over Gaul is that Gaul itself was not a unified country state. Germania wasn't either, but Germania had experience about what had happened in Gaul and had enough people willing to get with the program of, you know what, fuck those guys with their togas.
Well,
They don't wear pants. That's weird.
the recently pacified region of Gallia was still under transition, so logistics were
Yeah,
not on the Roman side at this point.
they were not. They were about as far as they could get reasonably from the empire. You might say, well, what about all the way over in Parthia? There's the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean forgives a lot of sins because it allows you to move vast amounts of men and material by boat
And don't
very
forget
quickly.
the many rivers that exist there. Well, what about the Rhone? Yeah, that's the point. The Rhone is also wide. There's a reason why the Rhone and the Rhine,
Very wide.
like the Rhine in particular, was an excellent border. In fact, it's to the point where it was turned into a series of defensive walls.
Right. Not to forget that the Rhine was a serious border all the way up to 1945. It's a very big river. It's a relatively quick river too. It's not pondering and meandering. It is a strong waterway with a strong current that's wide enough to give you trouble. And God forbid you try to build a bridge over that shit. It's not going to be easy.
But yes, in short, this is after the Republic died the death, and a young, sickly fella that we actually talked about in the Cleopatra mummy section, named Octavian
Yes.
Augustus, became the first citizen of Rome. And he very much was interested in further expanding upon his own legend by going further. Because his uncle
Yes.
did an excellent job with Gaul, he wanted to have a similar success because despite the defeat of Egypt, he had to compare himself to his predecessors to match what he thought the Romans needed to see in a leader.
It's also that, to a degree, Germania was a natural expansion route.
It was. It
The
also
Empire
had
had
a lot of potential valuable resources. In particular, the woodlands. The woods were extremely useful.
woodlands,
Not just
forests,
for
amber,
lumber.
iron.
Yep. I believe
there's
tin
a lot
deposits
of
were found.
resources.
I know there's lead. They
Yes.
found lead there too.
Yeah, all of that is very useful to Roman industry and Roman development. And if you tame this area, it's also a good buffer frontier zone because remember, a lot of the Roman expansion is sort of the idea of, well, if we make these tribes, foederati and companions to us, they will be excellent buffers against other worse, more barbaric tribes.
Which they succeeded
Germania
at when
is
they
sort of-
invaded Brighton.
Yeah, which to a degree, this is sort of where the push into Germania kind of comes from. Is this, what about the thing over the horizon? It's also ambition, but I should also note that while we call him Emperor Augustus, that would not have been the title that he would have used himself.
Again, he always
That's
called
too
himself
kingly.
usually, I believe it was either Princeps or just Augustus or the August one. Also first citizen.
Yeah, basically, first citizen Princeps. It's basically the same meaning. Everybody knew he was ruling with the authority of a king, but nobody really cared after the last, 20 years of civil war?
Also, the last couple of times he gutted the Senate, and he also gave them things that made them think they still had power. At least some power.
Yeah.
But in this case, the expansion actually... This is interesting because this splat kind of does the same thing that the Viking book does. However, this does this better for one big reason.
It's not a singular event. This
Well, no,
campaign
it's
is
not the
a
death of an
singular
irrelevant
event.
Irish king. This
It's
was
not even that. It was
an
this
event
is an
that wiped out 3 legions.
Well, this is after that mostly.
Still, it's within that frame. No one cares about Brian Boru except Irishmen. I'm sticking with that, by the way.
But going on to the main story and how the werewolves get involved, we have a werewolf that was once named Ermanaz, named
No, he's not a
Arminus
werewolf.
when he
He's
was
actually wolf-blooded. It's similar
wolf-blooded.
to kin.
Wolf-blooded. Yeah. He was raised by the Romans, so he knows Roman tactics, he knows their strength, and he knows their arrogance and weakness.
You would know him as
So he is trying to
Arminius.
unite his people.
You would know him as Arminius,
He's
the
right.
man who was responsible for the Battle of Teutoburg.
He's the one that kind of comes in and he was a Roman auxiliary at one point. He was actually a Roman equites, a citizen of Rome, and he kind of realized what was happening. The plan to colonize Germania was in full swing, and he had a nice front row seat to it in other parts of the world, and decided, you know what, I'd rather my home not go through this. It's gonna suck. So he coerced, browbeat, assembled other leaders into effectively a fighting force, not really for liberation, but more of get them the fuck out of here.
And in the Chronicles of Darkness, he has wolf blood, meaning he is of kin, if not capable of transformation like the Uratha.
This is one thing where I'm like 50-50 on that. This could be great for a chronicle because it connects you to a relatively important historical figure. I mean, there's statues of this guy to this day that are standing around the battle site. But also, we don't know as much about him as you'd think. He's one of those important but not much known about figures of history.
His legacy was mostly written by Roman historians, and while they were probably among the best in the time period, at the end of the day, a Roman historian is about as honest as a Han Dynasty scholar writing about the history of the Han Dynasty.
It's also that a lot of this is from the Roman perspective because the Germans really didn't keep records as we'd understand them. A lot of it was oral history. A lot of it, if it was written down, it didn't survive. So,
if it was written down, it was specifically only the most important aspects. That's where things like Furthark came about. It was traditionally, at best, saved for very important religious sites or very important things.
Right. The other thing about this whole section that makes it different than the whole Viking era Geist and werewolf setting is that it very narrowly focuses around a very specific series of campaigns which last over the next decade or so from Teutoburg.
It does, and that's the other thing. Scale. This is not just one shitty fucking battle in Ireland that is being poorly used to describe the Vikings. I would be okay if they did like 2 or 3, like they did Great Heathen Army, then Brian Boru's death, because that was the death of the Irish Vikings' dominance on the island. If they did like a couple of set pieces, I wouldn't be mad. This is where it works. Yeah, it's only the same series of years, but this is a big campaign that covers basically the stretch of the Rhine.
Right, it's a consequential one over a large area, over a grand time scale. If you wanted to run a chronicle in this, you could easily have an entire generation of werewolves involved in this.
Well, given how quickly they die,
which is to the strength of this campaign.
Sense,
yeah, which is to the strength of the campaign, where it's by the end of it, your characters are genuinely elders
or dead
within their pack or tribe or dead because they've experienced a brutal tribal warfare. Remember, the Germans weren't just fighting the Romans; they were fighting among themselves too at this time.
Because some tribes were willing to play ball with Rome, and some of them just straight up hated the Confederation and Federati.
Yeah, who are here, or they're genuinely legionaries. There's easily room in here for a pack of legionaries,
and
that have to get their way home, right?
And also to add that on the Roman side, you have the Forsaken and the Pure allying with each other.
Right, because fuck these guys, right?
Which I think is really
This
interesting.
is civilization as we know it.
And of course, this is leading to the corruption of the Hissel.
Right. Like, this is... Well, the Hissel is already corrupted, whatever. But the point being that this is sort of a really useful tool that if you're really into Werewolf and you're really into historical games, I mean, it's great. There's a lot to mine here for use in your game and your chronicle and whatever the fuck
You know what else I
you're
would
going to
say?
call it.
We
It's
talked
great for
about that Roma book
We did.
a month or so
Yeah.
ago. That would actually probably
The
be
Powered by the Apocalypse game that doesn't suck.
that would be a great companion to this. As let's say you're playing as a regular Roman, and you're trying to figure out what has gone awry with the legions, and now you're fighting werewolves. And thankfully, in this
Right.
case, you're not fight. The stats would mean you're not fighting the werewolves from Chronicles of Darkness, because those guys will just kill you.
Oh yeah, no, like Chronicles Werewolves. Second edition Forsaken's werewolves are genuine little murder blenders, and I love them for it. They're not quite as lethal as some other splats, but they do have the ability to immediately, in rage, to just go down to dirty combat. That means that if they win their rolls, that NPC just McFucking dies. No saves, just they die.
It's just way too
they
much
deal
damage.
lethal damage enough that they just die.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nasty. It's really nasty. And remember, oh yeah, the individual werewolf, that's not that scary. There's a pack of them. There's a pack of them that has probably been hunting you and is in ambush and has planned this out.
I killed one of them.
You're
cool.
going to
There's
die.
5 more. 2 of them on your right, 1 on your left, and the one in the trees.
One behind you.
And one inside you.
One inside you. It's the fucking one penny arcade comic that they pulled back from. You know the one.
But
But
yeah,
let's
the
go on
big
to
theme is Rome is
what
coming,
has-
and you're going to have to deal with that. You're either going to fly or you're going to die.
Either you're with Rome or you're against Rome, and the battle lines are being drawn not only among the humans, but also among werewolves, because this is a big change to everything.
And
The spirit world in general is
Oh,
going to
yeah.
shift, and how is that going to affect your pack?
There's also only a couple things saving your ass. Number 1, your climate. Germania is much
the
colder.
Romans. The Romans eventually caught on to the idea that pants weren't in fact only for barbarians, but also were great at keeping your balls from freezing. But that would take them a while to get used to.
Oh,
This is
also
still
don't
that period
forget
where they're
crops
kind of learning that.
Sorry. Don't forget their crop packages are different enough. There's a reason Germany only has a small stretch of it that's really good at growing wine.
Right. The climate's different, so the crops that you're used to growing might not grow the same way or the same intensity or at the same times of the year.
Yep, the quality wheat that the Romans are known for probably won't grow as well as the barley or rye that the Germans would farm. Because there were farmers among them. They weren't purely hunter-gatherers. Some were, but not all.
Well, none of them were. None of them were really. The
Well, it
hunter-gatherer
depended on
lifestyle
the
at this
area.
point is basically gone.
Well, I mean, there were probably... I'm thinking mostly like once you get further east, mostly.
Even then,
Fair
this is a
enough.
misconception a lot of like the barbarian populations in Europe is that they weren't sophisticated. They didn't have advanced societies. No, they did.
They had to some degree.
It's just
I
that
just...
they didn't write this
with-
shit down.
Yeah, Germany's a lot harder. I'm much more familiar with Gaul. That's kind of why I'm being a bit biased here. It's not against their culture.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. This is one of my weak points.
I get you. It's hard to know this sort of stuff, and
I knew they were perfectly
it's also
capable of
great.
growing crops. I just didn't know if there were still
Yeah.
tribes that were partially nomadic still.
not really.
Not near the
I mean,
Rhine,
you
but
had-
like further east.
You had tribes that would migrate, but that's a different sort of thing.
Fair enough.
Usually that was because some other tribe had kicked them completely off of their land, and it was either move or die. At which point they would move to a new area, settle down, either integrate among the locals or kick them out themselves, and start farming again.
Fair enough. That's actually good to know.
This is one of those things that people like the misconception of the endless hordes of barbarians going into Rome. That really wasn't the case. Actually, the Romans were very good about taking these people and resettling them elsewhere within the empire because they understood completely that, you know what's really great to have? A population of people that owes us, has their own political leadership that is completely beholden to Rome, and will farm the land and provide soldiers to us for basically no cost to ourselves.
They did that quite
and they
often.
can
In fact, one of the ones I remember
Yes.
most infamously were they did this to the Goths.
Yes, they did. They did this to several groups of Goths, and then the Theodosh. Yeah, but by the end of it, they kind of fucked up.
Wait. So you're saying the Romans provided aid in a form of soft power?
Yes, the Romans were masters of soft power along their borders. It's one of the reasons why their coins are everywhere, both across Europe and all the way to India.
Yep, you'll find coinage in India. There are also I remember this because it's really freaking cool. They found burial sites among the older not Sami, but the Uralic peoples that were further where the Slavs expanded. You would find them and in Sarmatian burial grounds in like the steppes of Ukraine and
Yeah.
around like the Kuban that had the coins like deep in there. You'll find them. I think they even found coins as far east as where like about where the Yongnu were.
Yes, Roman coins got everywhere
I
because
know they
it's a
found some
silver
further
coin.
south in like Kush and Axum as well. I think they even made it to like Great
Yes,
Zimbabwe.
they did. They made it to. Yes, they did. They actually made it as far south as Dar es Salaam. This is just people like love to think of the ancient world as this weird insular place where like there's no movement, there's no peoples moving around.
I mean,
or
where do you
else.
think the term dinar
Solid
came
blocks
from?
of cultures.
Denarii.
Yeah, but that's the thing. There's always people that go out and see that they can take other people and they can sell them shit. And coins are a great way to trade because it's a valuable material that people like because it's shiny.
Case in point, you can
So
find
Roman
Zescari
coins-
down in West Africa quite commonly.
Exactly, because it was a very convenient way to show wealth. You see similar things all the way like far inland in North America where you see like cowrie shells. How do these cowrie shells get here? Well, the reason why is quite simple. They were using them as a form of currency exchange.
Same in China. In fact, the first currencies in China, the original ones they designed, were actually bronze replicas of cowrie shells.
Right. It looks neat. It feels nice in the hand. Of course it's valuable
There
to
is
somebody.
a scarcity, and it lasts long enough to have value.
So when we're talking about like the society, the Germans, for example, it's a sophisticated culture.
They're
like,
more
I
sophisticated
hate
than you
to have
think.
to stress this.
Because now that you've mentioned this, they're very similar. If you've ever heard anything about the Celts, they had some similarities in terms of organization, but also quite a few differences.
Yes.
For
There
example,
were differences religiously.
the region, because it's colder and farming seasons were harsher, a lot more they tended to wear thicker clothing. Another great example is that here is a fun fact: there were roads, quite a few roads in Germania. Now that you're reminding me, and they were primarily made of wood to go over boggy regions, or just because it was a great way to replace. You had a lot of wood, just carve it up.
I highly recommend that if you're thinking this is a cool setting to do research, do historical research into the archaeology of this sort of era and these places because it's fascinating.
Because I don't know Germans as well as I do the Celts. Celts are very well known for their ironworking, smithing. They're also known for actually building fairly established roads systems as well. In fact, they actually were known to, I believe in some of their holy sites, they built them out of stamped metal in a few places. I don't remember if that's correct, but they were very impressive in terms of their culture. The only reason the Romans defeated them was because they were disunited. They would have gotten their shit pushed.
Yes, it's also
otherwise.
important to note that both the Germans and the Celts were known, especially the Gauls, for horsemanship, which is something the Romans really didn't get on board with until the later Empire era.
And the Celts also were known for trading well with the Greeks. In fact,
for example,
Massalia, you can find Greek amphore, pottery, Mosaic. You can find a lot of trade goods all the way up to where Paris, or where what it was known as originally Lugdunum, not Lugdunum. Lugdunum, I think, is London. But you can find it where the site of Paris is. You can find you could find occasionally Greek artifacts, at least originally.
No, London is actually a Roman settlement originally, built on a older British
It might have
settlement.
been. It might have been.
The only name that we have for it is Londinium.
I don't remember.
It's Londinium was the original.
I know there is a barbarian site, like a Celtic site. Sorry, my brain ain't working too good. A Celtic site around where Paris is, just because it's a great place since it's near the Marne and shit like that.
Oh yeah, it's right on a river. It's perfect. It's great. You see the
Marseille, I know. Massalia.
Sorry, the booze is hitting
the Greek
me a little
Massalia. The Greek part of Massalia. Oh,
yes,
so yeah, we're
Marseille
all a
started
little
as a Greek
tipsy.
city.
But it was built there because of the river, which
Perfect.
allowed you to go all the way to the Atlantic very easily, which would allow you to trade with tin mining, with the tin mining tribes of Britannia.
Right. There's also other factors involved with
Lutetia,
this, but in
thank you,
general,
Jim. Thank you.
But yes, in general, the idea that everyone at this point is barbarians is more of a Roman concept than anything else.
Well, of course,
I think
they're
that's
not
important.
speaking Latin.
Yes, they don't speak Latin, and they sound Greek speakers like they're just saying bar, 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 all over again. It's basically their equivalent to saying blah, blah, blah.
They cover themselves in fat. They don't use olive oil like we do to clean ourselves.
Yeah, they do things that are weird to us, like they'll cook their stuff with animal fat, and they'll do like these strange rituals to their gods, and there is human sacrifice. I don't want to neglect to mention that. Some people say, "Oh, that's slander." No. Human sacrifice has been an integral part of a lot of religions across the history. I mean, even Christianity involves, to a degree, ritualized cannibalism. It's a common trope.
And
It's
among the
something that a lot of
Germanians,
cultures
this is
gravitate
something that
towards.
is different from the Celts. The Celts sometimes did it. The Germans did it much more often. That's where the great blood sacrifices come from.
Yes, the Germans basically had the Germans basically had the idea that the best way to honor the gods, especially their chief god Odin, to the Germans, not the Germans, the Romans for whatever reason equivalented him with Mercury, likely because they were both traveler gods.
Yep.
To a degree,
Odin the traveler, Odin the
for,
knowledgeable.
Yes, he's associated with knowledge, travel especially, because remember, part of the reason for the hospitality traditions is the suspicion that anybody could be Odin in disguise.
It's a very common theme.
And he would and he would reward you for being having hospitality for strangers.
Swinging it back to Lord of the Rings, Gandalf the Grey is legitimately designed in the style of old depictions of Odin.
Yes. There's other aspects to it, but in general, the faith of these people is rather well documented, though not from Roman sources. A lot of it's extrapolated from what we have of the Norse Eddas, which are a bit of a suspect source.
They're suspect because...
But not as much as you'd think.
They're suspect mainly because the medieval Norse kings had no understanding of their history, and it got 1,000 times worse when the Great Northern League broke apart and Sweden freed itself.
It's
because
also
it was so bad they invented kings on the spot. That's why you had stuff like Eric the 14th.
Yes, it's also that, you remember, our best source is literally some random Iceland man whose political ambition was to unite Iceland with the Kingdom of Norway. So he was intent on stressing the shared heritage of both Iceland and Norway under an old ancient pantheon, which definitely has had some Christianization applied to it. Because remember, the original Eddas basically say that, oh yeah, the gods aren't really gods, they're all survivors from Troy that somehow fled to the north.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is genuinely how he got away with some of the stuff talking about this mythology. Is like, they're obviously not gods. They're
by the
refugees
way, the escaping
from
Troy. You could argue technically that's where the original concept of Numenor came from before the Noarchic flood came in.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because remember, Tolkien was an Edda's fan.
Tolkien was also very familiar with the history of the Saxon language and all this. Tolkien was a nerd, like a real fucking big nerd.
Oh god, yeah, he wore tweed jackets for fuck's sake.
He wore tweed jackets, yeah. It's also important to note that Tolkien did a lot with linguistics based on both Saxon language and like the Celtic and Germanic languages in general.
Oh yeah, he was critical actually, I believe,
Again,
for being the guy that really helped translate stuff like Beowulf and stuff like that.
yes, yes. Again, big fucking nerd. He knew all of this shit, and that definitely played a part in the development of Middle Earth. But we're getting way off track, and we have been for what, like 30 minutes here. So let's try to get back to the book.
Well, there's
I'm
a lot of
sorry.
complicated glossaries, like, hey, it's the Ancil, one of the 12 Satiri members of the Council of Eagles and Lightning. What does that mean? Read Requiem for Rome. It's a nod to that.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
think.
talking about the Roman werewolf clans, so there were originally two families, the Satiri and the Marici,
Oh no, then that's the Romans. Then
or
Roman
the
werewolves.
Marici.
Sorry, it's just I'm reminded of Requiem for Rome, which does talk about stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So they claim to have been traced back from Rome's founding.
Yep.
So the Satiri is closely linked to the Ivory Claws, descending from Silverwolf in the time of Heroes, and the Iron Masters belong to the Marici. I'm not that familiar with the different tribes in Forsaken, but I do remember that the Iron Masters were the more technologically savvy.
The Iron Masters are basically the tribe where their preferred prey is humans. That's the difference between them and a lot of the other tribes. Remember, every tribe in Forsaken has a preferred thing that they hunt, be it other werewolves, possessed, so on and so forth. In the case of the Iron Masters, it's humanity. They are specifically consider themselves guardians of the herd in some ways. Like their point that they'll target people that are directly damaging the spirit realm, be it a corrupt politician or cop, or just some random schmuck who decided that, you know what, the smartest thing we're going to do is we're going to build the land development site on a place where there's a spirit that's been concealed and held here for like the last 10 generations. Who cares? The
What I
humans don't
really
know, so you need
like.
to go and sabotage that shit.
No, what I really like, by the way, since they're describing this, the Saturii are a very strong reference to because the Romans were part of not just the Latin peoples, but they were part of a larger group known as the Sabines.
Yes.
So that's a very good nod to them, the Sabines. As for what the Marici are, the Teresh are the Tyrsenians. Who are the Tyrsenians? They would also be known as the Razna or Etruscans, those who were the kings of Rome before the city threw them out. They spoke their own
Yes.
language, which was not part of the Indo-European language branch.
Yes, the Etruscans are a fascinating culture. There's a lot that's written about them, but there's a lot we don't know about them because
The
they,
concept of
well,
orcs
for one
actually
thing,
come from them.
So
right, again,
wait,
Tolkien was a
orcs are
classics nerd.
Etruscans?
Yes, Orcos.
Orcs,
It was their
yes,
depiction of
Orcus
Hades, which was a
is the,
beast-like one-eyed giant.
They're not.
yeah,
They're not black
Orcus
people
is,
or Mongols.
no, they're Mexicans, is obviously portrayed in the player's guide. Let's move on.
All
Now,
right.
the linguistic stuff for Orcus is Orcus also became a Roman god of the dead.
He was
Uh,
associated with Pluto.
mhm.
Hmm.
In
But
any
back,
case,
back
back
to
to this.
Forsaken. So while these two families have had an ancient pact with Rome, there's a parasite that has been corrupting Rome, the Magna Mater. It was once the spirit of Rome itself. This twisted approximation of a god knows only hunger and gluttony. She feeds on a diet of prayer, ritual, and dead spirits brought to her through the conquests of the Roman
I can
legions.
tell where they got this
And it
from.
appear
This is a nod. This
and it,
spiritually, this has strong elements of Gladiator, the original Gladiator film, with the corruption of the Roman dream.
and it
That's
appears
cute.
it has set its sights on Magna Germania. However, in Germania itself, the Oratha, they basically live free. They do have freedom. Pacts hold grudges. Blood Talons feel shame for reasons long forgotten. But the Hizzle is healthy. It's not Pangea, but it's close as it can be. So we now have these very independent wolves and werewolves versus a much more tightly controlled and probably somewhat corrupted two werewolf families.
which is an interesting take. I like that.
Rather than it being the pure versus the forsaken, it really is much more of a political situation.
This is the best way
I
to
mean,
describe this to
that's
me is it's very much if you took a Werewolf the Apocalypse game where the antagonists are werewolves aligned to the Weaver, where if you go like against Glasswalkers, that's kind of what they're sort of going with here.
I. Well, yeah, that's the
If you
thing.
squint, which I think is a neat
Forsaken
conflict.
for the Forsaken, the dichotomy between the Forsaken and the pure is really a lot of it's more of a political religious schism. It's the question of whether or not you believe that Father Wolf needed to die. And if you can get over that and agree that you have, merits and desires that both agree with each other, there's zero reason for you to come into conflict. That's sort of where like the Iron Masters and the Ivory Claws kind of come together. Is it's like, all right, we both agree that Rome is good and the Magna is a pretty powerful spirit that we really, really should worship. She's kind of great. We're both Roman. Where they're going to come into conflict with each other is whether or not is over both how you are going to get that done and what should be prioritized within that. And that's an interesting political dichotomy of where it's like you're both Arathra of Rome. That's undeniable. But the question is, how much does that Romanness override the werewolfness? Where there's that tension between like whether or not you think that Father Wolf was rightfully killed.
And I think
And
we see this in their founding story.
Yep,
yes,
because these
So
Ivory
they say
Claws
they obviously
are not just they're not just old families. They're patricians traditionally. The elites, the upper
yes.
crust.
This is where we get into the fun stuff of this.
Oh, this is great. I love where they're going with this.
This is one of the reasons why I love the
And
Ivory
their totem
Claws, because
is
they're basically
Mars or the Red Wolf.
yes,
This is
yes,
fucking
and I
great.
love this because they go and they take this aspect of Roman culture, which is that Mars originally for Rome was not associated with Ares as much as you'd think. He was an agricultural. Part of that is because he had this association with agriculture in like kingdom era of Rome as it's developing as a city state, which
And
then
then you have the
expands
founding
into
brothers who are
the
raised by a
Greco-Roman
wolf.
syncretism.
And then you have the wolf
Right,
rearing
and
of
the
the
wolf is
twins.
one of his sacred symbols. Yes, and the wolf was one of his sacred symbols. Uh, because, well, imagine if you're a farmer or like an agriculturist around and you see wolves on the outer fields. That's an omens to fucking everything. It doesn't matter what it is; they will figure out a way to tell the future. I was grabbing something. I was grabbing something of that. But basically, there are these sacred chickens that would accompany Roman armies, and if they ate all of the grain, that was a good sign. So it was encouraged to starve the chickens ahead of a battle that you wanted to fight in order so that the sacred chickens would eat all of the grain, which obviously indicated that you would be victorious in the battle. So you should go ahead and do it. This also led to some other fun results where there's stories of commanders basically doing fraud with the chickens to disastrous results.
Oh yeah, imagine if you had to cheat twice and you still got bad omens.
Exactly. And that's where it kind of gets into this other aspect of the ancient world where it's like, you got to remember, this isn't like, oh, I believe in a vague way. This is like, no, 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 no. You have genuine evidence in front of you because the chickens are there. You're culturally conditioned to accept the fact that because the chickens are eating the grain, that's a good sign.
There's
This isn't
also
like some random belief thing. This is something that's intrinsic to their culture. And
well, it's
it's
not just their culture.
wonderful from a modern perspective.
It's also partially imparted because this is something people forget. The effect of the Etruscan influence. The Etruscans in particular were
Yes.
obsessed with prophecy and omen. The best way the Romans always described to their peers, which is a bit horseshit because they still kind of believe that way. The Romans believe that the gods provide portents and signs. The Etruscans believe that signs and portents direct the world. They
Right.
genuinely
So
were that superstitious, and that is an influence on Rome.
Right. The Etruscans had a lot of influence on later Roman culture from the practice of gladiators, which was originally an Etruscan custom, for instance, regarding the burial sacrifice of slaves, which then evolved into slaves fighting each other, which then evolved into the Roman gladiatorial games as we know it. A very interesting transition from a cultural standpoint, but more accurately, there's a lot of stuff with prophecy, and you'll see this even with people like Pliny the Elder. If you have the wonderful chance to somehow read one of the translations of his works, it's amazing what he gets right, and it's also really fucking funny what he gets wrong. My personal favorite being that he's like completely correct about like the stars and the sun are made of fire. They have to be, because fire rises, right? And then he's completely fucking wrong about a bunch of other things besides the moon. He's like, the moon has to be bigger than the Earth, right? Because otherwise, how would we get eclipses?
Which makes sense if you have no
Logic.
clue on the structure of the universe. Like if you just are basing it on your eye, that's not unreasonable. It would also not be an unreasonable take to think the
Exactly.
moon is the
What?
same size as the sun.
Well, question.
Exactly.
Did Pliny the Elder believe in a flat Earth?
No.
He did
Pliny
not,
the Elder
because
very specifically goes and says, no, that is stupid. Anyone who believes that is fucking stupid. Ask a sailor. A sailor will tell you the Earth is round because they can see stars rising above the horizon. And they
there's also the
he also
Greek
goes like,
philosopher
there's a guy,
Aristophanes.
yeah, who
Aristophanes
calculated the size of the
legitimately.
Earth to within like at least 80% correctness.
Oh
Which
no,
is
he was
insane when you consider that
98% accurate. He was only off by a radius of about I think a couple of 100 kilometers, or about 1,000 maybe at most.
it's insane, and he did this with basically back of the napkin math using two distant points that he knew were along a north-south axis to calculate the size of shadows at the time. It's fascinating to note how these people did that, because it's something that people go like, oh no, the ancient world was full of these people that didn't know shit, and it's like, no, they
Another
knew a
really
lot.
fun one.
It's just that
Another really fun one is there was at least one or two philosophers that hypothesized a heliocentric model. The only reason they couldn't, but it wasn't a case of them being completely right. They didn't have enough evidence and calculations and trajectories. But
right.
heliocentrism was a concept even back then too. It just never became popular.
It never caught on because it didn't make sense to so many people who were looking at things and like, well, everything seems to be moving around us.
They didn't have
So
telescopes at
from
this point.
therefore, it's not even that they didn't have telescopes. It's more that it's a way of looking at the world that is that what you can see and what you can experience, the Earth doesn't seem to move at all.
Mhm.
So the concept of heliocentrism makes you have to go like, all right, throw out all of these other assumptions about the elements and how other things about the world work to be able to rotate around the sun. They don't have the advanced mathematics that are really required at this point to fully get heliocentrism proved. Like that's the thing about Copernicus is the reason why we go and we look at Copernicus and say he's really important is because he did the math to prove that the world was rotating around the sun. He had the mathematics to back it up. The Greeks really didn't.
It's real. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and we're off topic, but again, I really love how they establish the concept of wolf-bloodedness in Rome, and it makes sense, doesn't it? The Romans venerated
Yes.
and have a strong wolf cult to the point where it still existed even after the Greekification of their deities.
Yes, you got to remember the wolf has always, to some degree, been the symbol of Rome. For Italy in general, it was usually the bull, or like the stallion, something like that, like a big masculine animal that was like the auroch, right? That was generally what a lot of the other Italian city-states settled on as like their big identifying animal. For the Romans, it was always the wolf, and the Romans, for example, would have people wearing wolf skins into battle as a sign of being Roman. There's a lot of other symbolism with that, where you can argue that this is the whole thing about the pack, the idea of like the coming together of all these people into this Roman state, because the Romans weren't just a city state in the traditional sense. They were a city state that came out of a tribal affiliation with each other that united into one. and this is getting way off topic, but like
No, it
that's
matters because Romulus. We talk about how he killed Remus, and we know in Requiem for Rome, Remus came back up from the dead due to an owl. Very evil bird.
right. And what's the symbol? What's the big symbol of the of Rome in this time period? It's the wolf. It's the she-wolf suckling the two founders of Rome. It's that, mind you, there's later authors that go like, well, that just means she was a prostitute, because that was one of the slang terms for a prostitute was a she-wolf, which is a fun linguistic conundrum, but whatever. The point being that this connection to wolves is intrinsic in Roman identity.
And as for the Aquila, that is mainly because of Romulus declaring victory, because his victory was based on spotting eagles.
Spotting birds of some kind. It was either eagles or vultures, depending on the tellings. But the point is that it was a bird of prey, and it also comes in conveniently with the association with of Jupiter, who again was partially an agricultural god, with the Roman Zeus. So Zeus's big symbol among the Greeks was an eagle. That was his sacred animal. Eagles and bulls. Well, the Romans weren't too fond of bulls, because bulls were the things that everybody else around them was, sacrificing to the great god. They did take this bull symbolism for Zeus to some degree, but the eagle is what really caught on with them. Because you're already worshiping somewhat a predatory animal. What's the second one? This one flies. It's even better.
And as for what the werewolf, Wolfkin Romulus did, because Romulus and Remus were both Wolfkin, Romulus then basically beat the shit out of the other Wolfbloods and Euratha, and then fed their ghosts to his ghosts.
Exactly. Yay. If you couldn't hear that, I was me clapping. So it ties it in very nicely, and that's what I appreciate about this. If you're going to go back into ancient history and founding myths and shit like that and tie it into supernatural beings, do your research and have fun with it.
Yeah, this is
advice for every writer.
Compare this to the Jehemedans we saw in Digenesis. Compare this to that.
Right. Have some fun with it. Be willing to appreciate it's going to sound ridiculous, because you're not part of that culture. To this culture, that sounds completely rational and normal. Right? Like, think about it like this from an outside perspective. Some alien comes down and sees a church and asks what they're doing. And they're like, well, we're worshiping a dead god. Okay, that's weird to start with.
Well, no, we also believe that it's not just a dead god. It is the dead god's son, who is a shard of the god, that we also ritualistically eat.
Yes, we killed and now we eat him. They're probably going to get right the fuck back on that UFO and go away.
No, and then they pull out the wine. Do you wish for some of his blood?
Yes, that's the other bit.
We also believe that he's also a third aspect.
Yes,
unless we're of a different church which doesn't believe that and rejects him violently.
Also, whether or not how much God he is has caused wars. No, and then
you have another guy show up going, no, he isn't the dead god they worship. There is one true God, and he is just the second to last of the great prophets. Ours is the great prophet, and you find out, and you have to. And
there's another one that goes like, no.
No, and then you have the Jewish man going, no, you're all wrong. None of this is right. None of this is right. Pulls out a book larger than they are. There's 21 volumes.
And then you have the one guy saying, no. You see, about 200 years ago, a guy found two tablets in his backyard, which show that the god,
the angel idiot,
came back to life, came to the other side of the world, and then
a bunch of other shit happened.
We're not going to
go into that right now because we're diverting enough again.
At some point, we really should show off
Rome
Dogs of the Vineyard.
We'd probably have a lot of fun.
So, going on with the history of the Roman werewolf.
A lot of this history is to a degree based on real history. It has to be. Otherwise, this wouldn't be any fun.
Yeah. They talk about Tarquin the Proud. I think he was a real guy.
Yep, Tarquin the Proud. He was the last he is the last king of Rome who was ejected.
Yep, setting up a council of 12 Satyri Ancilia and 12 Marasai Sali, elder political individuals. They would have a foederati. Basically, they're kind of faux representative democracy.
And I
Represent a
also,
republic.
Well,
again, a slight comment here.
it's
I
a
want to.
parody of the Roman Republic. Like, I'm looking at it, and it's the basic concept of the Roman Republic, but through the lens of werewolves.
Yes, and I also want to note the Roman rights section here, which is very true. The Romans were very strict about their religion, and this is one of the reasons why they were able to integrate so many peoples into their empire, is that to the Romans it did not matter whether or not you were faithful to the gods as much as it was that you did the rituals correctly. Remember, ancient faith was as much transactional as it was like a spiritual experience. If a god wasn't working out for you, you would happily swap to a new one. Because this one, if you sacrifice to them and obviously something starts going right for you, well, that's just proof that that god's working for you and that you need to keep worshiping them. This is why, like, foreign cults like ISIS were able to catch on in Rome along with the civilians, is that for these people, this was genuinely a helpful deity to them.
Oh, I actually
They
like
had
that they
nothing to say
reference the cult
otherwise.
of Terminus, which, if you're wondering, also is from the Etruscan pantheon. I
Yes.
believe. Oh man, what was his name? It wasn't Termes. That's Hermes. But there is a god that essentially, in a way, was a fusion of Jupiter as well. But his whole thing was boundaries. Like, he was known as the
Janus
king.
might be who you're thinking of.
No, he's not Janus. Crap. I mentioned
Because Janus is the god of doors. People forget that. Janus isn't just the two-faced one. He's also the god of doors.
Yep, he is the Lord of
And
the Doorway
entries.
and entries and exits. But no, there is an
Liminal gods are
Etruscan
fun.
god. I forget his name. It's like Tingus or something. But it's just kind of neat
In
that you
any
see the
case,
influence, though. It's kind of neat.
it's important that they talk about this sort of thing because it gives you an idea of what the actual history is. Because I need to talk about the Lares again because I want to stress this. They really messed out on not doing a Sin Eater setting in Sulla era Rome,
Oh God.
where like
Oh, that'd be
because
perfect.
yes, because the big thing about the Romans is the Romans believe that their dead to a degree walked among them. There was a degree of ancestor veneration, not really a cult, but more like the dead would walk among the living on certain days and commune with them. This is sort of where the Lares.
If you're wondering, this was the Mediterranean equivalent of, well, the Celtic Samhain. Essentially,
Right. It's
they
a
had a
very
day to venerate their
similar
dead.
festival. Yeah, it's a very similar festival. The point being though that Lares were ancestral spirits that if you honored them would help you basically. They were household gods to a degree, but also your ancestors. It's kind of an interesting thing. I'm a little too tipsy to go into full detail.
Which in Requiem for Rome, vampires often like to disguise or pretend to be the Lares to fuck with people and get things out of them.
Yes, which is fantastic and great world building and great use of actual real world cultural parts and beliefs to
And in
make the world more
Werewolf,
realistic.
this is what Romulus did. He took your grandma, who died as a beauteous old woman, respectful, gave you your knowledge of right and wrong. He fed her to his uncle.
Right.
Grandma
And that's
got
where we get the
eaten.
Magna Mater.
And the Magna Mater, it was always fed by, the Rome's triumphs, by their kings. Its martyrs took the names and forms of Rome's gods. And then 390 BCE, the Gauls sacked Rome, and the martyrs had no way to react.
Yep.
Their food supply
Right.
vanished,
And they started
turned on
feeding
each other.
Right. Like that's the thing about how the spirit world works that people forget about with, especially with Forsaken, is that it's like an ecosystem. There are smaller spirits that are preyed upon by larger spirits. A great example that they have is the supermarket and the ecosystem that you would find in a Walmart, which is fascinating. If you ever get the chance to read that out of Forsaken, it's a great way to describe how like a spirit ecology works.
I kind of
Basically
low-key
put-
love the idea, though, of a one-shot chronicle where you're a small pack of werewolves that have to deal with the spirit of a Walmart who's gone mad with power.
A Walmart Supercenter. A Walmart Supercenter has its own spirit,
And
and
it's
that
trying
spirit
to
is fed by
devour the
lesser spirits
spirits of
that
the
basically
local towns,
represent
yeah.
products and brands. And don't forget the shopping carts, because the shopping cart spirits will collect other spirits to deliver them to so on and so forth. It's a fun way to describe and get the idea behind, like, how does this actually work in practice? Is a supermarket.
I'm just
A
envisioning the
supermarket is a
cashier
great
spirits
way
weighing
if
the
you want.
werewolf souls.
Yes. The cashier, like the spirits of the registers are going to have an important part in like the transactions of that spirit world. You get the sort of the idea that like this is how you build a spirit world for your players. Is literally if you can make a supermarket interesting, then you can move on to something else, because the idea of a group of werewolves having to deal with like the fucking spirit of the local Walmart that's gotten too big and powerful is a fantastic way for a chronicle. It sounds like a shit post, but if you can make that compelling, you can make anything compelling.
But
And
yes,
we've
after the
digressed a little
sacking.
bit. But
After the sacking,
But
the
so
Magna Mater freaked out and began eating the supporting spirits that supported it.
yes, this is how spirits sort of work.
the same thing happened when Hannibal Barca invaded Italy, and because again the spirits are fed by conquest, but now they're being conquered.
And we should also know that the Saturi are the ones, because the pure have a different relationship with the spirit world and the Forsaken to a degree. The Forsaken look at spirits as a thing that's like they are honorable, they can be very handy, they can be very useful, but we are their predator. We eat them. We are shepherding them and we are dealing with them, because once they reach too big, we just can't eat at them anymore directly. Usually, think about it like how like wolves would view things like a mammoth, right? Like they could prey on a younger mammoth, but they're not going to take on a fully grown one unless they're really fucking desperate. That's what like a large spirit ecosystem, like the head of that is probably like that mammoth. It's a spirit that understands that werewolves are predators and has a relationship with them very different than other lesser spirits would.
But then there, within all this catastrophe, the Sibylline books,
Oh,
Oracle
fuck
Oh,
Congregation,
yeah,
yeah,
we're
this
doing
is-
Sibel. Hell yeah, we're going there.
Yes,
they
this is great.
prophesized that the last and the greatest of the martyrs would come from a land to safeguard Rome's wolves. They took a statue of Sibylline from Pergamon in
Yep,
205
Sibel was an
BC,
Eastern Greek god, Greek and Lydian god,
and
goddess, I
it
should
was
say.
said to have come from a strange stone said to be a star fallen to the earth during her festival.
And here we
Unbeknownst
go.
to all,
We're
the star
actually
contained not
doing
a
some
goddess, but
Lovecraft
an
references.
alien spirit desperate for freedom and power, one imprisoned by Urfara in the time before, in Indigam,
Indigum.
which I
And
believe
again,
are
I will
those
stress again,
those are those spirits that are Lovecraftian, that are not based on anything we
the
know
better
of.
way to put it is that Indigum are spirits where there's no context for them in the modern, like the way that the spirit world worked for us. A good description of them is they are the spirits of grand concepts. They are not. This means that they have powers that, for most spirits, which are like a physical reflection of the world or like beliefs and emotions and things like this, like a spirit of pure language could easily be an Indigum, because the context for something like that is completely different both in power scale and in understandability than anything else a werewolf might encounter.
You know what? I had a dark shit
Like
post. I had a dark shit post. When Moishe was at the burning bush, he ran into an Indigim of
Oh
language.
no.
I am.
Yeah,
Oh
or
no.
like self-awareness, which you can start to get into some very weird esoteric bullshit, and to a degree Lovecraft.
You're cutting in and out again, by the way.
On a completely different context than talking for.
Oh, I got
Let me check. It's on me, I think.
yeah for it.
Yeah, it's on me.
Concept of theory.
Fucking hell, mate. Ugh.
Perhaps an idiom of audio corruption. and audio issues.
Yes. I guess well, it's fine, but
So in the meantime, going on with this section, this Idigam took over and corrupted the Magama. It
yeah,
became
it
strange.
integrated with it.
It
It's
demanded
no. Give
dominance
me a
within the
bit.
Shadow of Rome.
And
Give me a bit. Come the fuck on. Stop throwing a tantrum, fucking internet. Do I have to like unplug and replug it? I
technical
don't want to.
difficulties.
Da, 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 da,
There, Jesus fucking Christ.
And we're back.
Sorry about that, guys. I've been having some net issues. Some of it is just, I don't know. There, holy crap. But yeah, Sibel
Have you
is,
tried the right of percussive maintenance?
if it wasn't for the fact I was
Basically
streaming, I
put,
would have
this
unplugged
cult
my
being
internet.
integrated into Rome. Basically put, the Indigum integrated itself with the Magna Mater, because Indigum, again, they're still spirits to a degree, but it's just that the ways that they work are completely different. Not really completely different, like just because they're in an alien sort of spirit that things get weird. Anyway, I'd have to reread the Forsaken Second Edition to really give you a detail along with their splat book about the Indigum. Point being, though, that they are dangerous as fuck, because a lot of things that would normally work on them do not work for werewolves.
Yeah,
Like, they might not be able to be bit in the
chat's,
same way.
yeah, the chat, the stream got choppy for a bit. Honest to God, I'm sorry. I don't fucking know what's wrong with my connection. It's getting better though. I again apologize. It wasn't like this until literally half an hour, like an hour ago. We should be good now.
Quickly,
I had to
perform
jiggle. I had
the
to
various
jiggle
rites
the.
and rituals.
I jiggled the literal Wi-Fi antenna.
It seems to have fixed it for me. You're no longer cutting out. So
I had to fucking move the Wi-Fi antenna. Something was blocking it. Some bullshit was blocking it, I think.
So,
I would have loved to have turned
with
it on and off,
this,
but it would have cut the stream for a bit.
right.
so with, I guess, with this corruption, though, you also have the fact that the werewolves, they often were within the Roman legions. The
Why
Marsi
wouldn't they
encouraged new
be?
training
Because
regimes. Yeah, the Satyri were able to create potent fetishes from the first slain Pyrrhic elephants, using them to slaughter
which is
more.
amazing, by the way, the idea that like the elephants of Pyrrhus of Epirus, the spirits of those got enslaved by Roman werewolves to make like powerful spirit magic. That's great. That's wonderful. I
So,
love it.
so you have a corrupted spirit that is hungering for more and more, along with traditions of werewolves being soldiers.
Right,
In
because
comes Gaius Julius Caesar.
exactly. Well, more accurately, Marius, but then later Gaius Julius Caesar, who creates an entirely new sort of situation.
The Aquile fed the shredded essences of tribal totems and local spirits back to Rome.
And this is where it gets really fun. We're going to get into this in a second, because you got to remember this. The Aquila for a legion was this sort of the same thing as like a standard for a regiment in the Napoleonic Wars. This was their identity in a object. Imagine
If
that
you
as a spirit, and you start
if
to
you
get
have
the idea of where we're going here.
yeah, if you have ever, it basically is the legion's totem for their tribe.
Yep.
Right.
And then we have the fact that the Senate in Pompey denying Caesar's triumph, it denied the Magna Mater. She howled at this insult, calling for blood and driving the spirits under her command into a frenzy. The civil war fed her well. The Satyri, though, were backing Pompey and Crassus, the Marsi backing Caesar, because Caesar won. This became his long overdue triumph, the first triumph to celebrate victory over Rome itself, and the Magna Mater feasted evermore.
And then let's get into the next sidebar, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
Julius Caesar is technically a samurai by birth, because the Julii were not political heavyweights, but they eventually became so under Caesar again. What worked with this, though, is that Augustus's paternal line, and I love this, is actually Marici. His mother was Caesar's niece. Roman adoption laws become very interesting, because remember, it's who adopts you that your family name becomes, and your paternal line basically is your inheritance. Remember that one of the reasons why you would have, say, Caesar Augustus adopting the son and daughter of not Pompey, of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, is because it erases those children's claim on their parents' property by legal custom. They are, effectively speaking, the children only, from a legal standpoint, of Augustus Caesar.
And they decided to take what culturally was a real thing and make it a spiritual thing too, which is pretty cool. Because
Yes, it's great.
Augustus does have Marici blood, but on a spiritual count, he is Satiri, no questions asked. That's fucking great.
Yeah.
It's
Though now
fantastic.
we now continue on though with Caesar's days as dictator. Obviously, his rule was denied to him by the knives of senators.
Right,
while the
which then
Magna Mater,
leads. We'll skip this because otherwise we'll go into another 5-hour diatribe. But long story short, Augustus wins the Civil War, and the Magna Mater feasts upon the purges and everything else that's happening during it.
And by this point, the werewolves are getting weirded the fuck out by this ghost.
well, particularly the Marici, which, if I remember, the Marici backed Caesar.
Yes, the Marici backed Caesar and backed Augustus because, for one thing, Augustus was technically speaking one of them. Caesar, though, was backing the causes of the Marici, which included during the Civil War. So, they kind of win that one out. The next step, though, is where it gets very interesting.
So, the Samurai, they don't fear Magna Mater. They instead say that she's just now recovering her full power, especially as Imperator Augustus becomes Pater Patriae, the father of Rome.
Exactly.
Espousing the ideals of the Magna Mater, Imperium sine fine, sovereignty without end. And he transfers his Saturni nephew-in-law, Publius Quintilius Varus, to Germania.
Where's my legions, Varus?
And then we get into the next stuff. They talk about the blood talents, and this is where I think is very interesting and a very good discussion about how the tribes work in Forsaken, in that they can sometimes be self-cannibalizing. Remember, the thing that the blood talons like the most is killing other werewolves. That's their prey. That's their specialty.
They stalk the
They're the
Uratha,
tribe.
too.
Yes, that's their tribe. They kill werewolves. That's their sacred prey.
And they turn on each other.
They turn on each other.
Yeah.
After they've wiped out the other tribes in the area, they start turning on each other. There's a balance to all of this, and it's been upset on both sides.
And in
They hunted other
that,
prey. They devoured gods, terrorized humans, annihilated the hosts, and pursued the claimed and ridden.
Right. And you start to see why things go bad on both sides. This isn't just like, oh, the Romans, they're coming in and they're awful, they're evil. No. The German werewolves are in just as much shit as the Roman ones are, just in a different way.
Because the gods in the Hissel, they still hold their grudges, even if the blood talons no longer remember them.
Right.
The giants, witch folk more fleed before the Suiba Aratha. The Suiba so they're upsetting their own land as well.
When you were talking about the Hissel is corrupted, the Hissel's always been in a weird state of imbalance. That's its nature. It's cut off by the gauntlet, arguably, from the real world, where it was originally. So it's kind of an imbalanced as is. and werewolf actions can have great effect on that.
And
Remember, supernatural border patrol is kind of the thing where they're trying to keep it from getting too much in, but they still need to come in here to feed.
yeah. They'll bring us now to Erminez. He is the son of a blood talon, Edolof
Yes.
Sigmar, chieftain of the Subi Crucii, leader of the 12 tribes, head of the Unbegoren, worshipper of... Oh, I'm blanking on his name from Warhammer now, but moving on from this little aside.
Well, before then, I
Sigmar...
find something fun. So they decided to try to make him a bit Viking because they mentioned the Swebos, which is the term for Germany, for the Germans of the region.
Yeah, the
They
Subii.
came from apparently Scandinavia. Just to let you know.
Well, yeah, like that's the thing. The Roman description of a lot of these tribes, to a degree, they have an idea of Scandinavia. They have an idea of these lands beyond. You can listen to Tacticus talking about where like the Teutons and the Suebii and all this sort of stuff came from. They have an idea of like these lands that they know a bit about the Baltic. They know enough about this that they have a vague idea of where these people come from, but not to the same extent that we would understand today. And it's not really a great ethnological study, but it's very interesting to see what they say because it gives us an input on like the exchanges between these places at this time. It gives us a better idea, though not perfect.
So, Sigmar, he sees the Aquila shred the gods, and while the legions butchers people.
Oh yeah, the
So to
Cherushki got fucking
save
destroyed.
himself,
Yes, they
he
did.
sends his 2 young sons to Rome as hostages. And he vowed to the god Donar, and I believe it's Thor,
basically.
Yep.
Thor.
that he would get his vengeance on the Romans. The Romans would rename his sons, and Arminius would adapt well. He would become a Roman citizen, a commander in the Auxilia. He would, though, see what has happened to the Hissel. Since he has come from a land where
It went too wild.
it's wild, and
No,
bear in mind,
it's
he is...
always unbalanced. In this case, it
Yeah.
went too wild, and they kind of murdered each other into insanity.
But he is also the son of a son of a son of a son of god killers, of god eaters.
And he sees what the hell he's looking at, which is a horrendous woolly
A
mammoth.
horrendous overfed god, and it's like we need to take this thing the fuck down.
Because
And
this is the
now they were
opposite
going
of,
to-
of
yeah.
what we have. And ours is bad, but this is also really bad.
Right.
And now he is seeing that the Magna Mater is hungry for the gods of Germania.
And
the gods that are
that's a
theirs.
problem. That's a problem. And his
So,
solution
yeah.
is let's just fucking kill him.
We're just gonna kill him.
We're just gonna kill him. It's a very simple solution. It's very elegant. And in no way will it have ramifications later on to slaughter 3 entire legions in Germania. What could possibly happen afterwards, if you know anything about the Romans at all, of what they'll do in response?
Woe to the vanquished.
Well, that's the thing. The Romans are a people that I want to remind you. After the battle of what was it, Currahee, or I think it was the Curai, that basically the entire Roman field legions were completely wiped the fuck out. They have no actual soldiers really left aside from garrison pockets across the Italian peninsula. Do you know what the Romans fucking do almost immediately in response? They manumit slaves, grab poor citizens, arm them both, reform their legions, and prepare to fight again.
Rome
and then they
does
also
not
get
like it
smacked
when
again.
they... Rome does not like it when
that's when
they
Fabian
lose.
takes over, and Fabian says, "You know what we're not going to do? We're just not going to fight this army in the field. It's not going to win. We can't win.
Dead.
We're going to slowly starve them out, and like hold corridors and hold things where it's like they're going to try to threaten a precise battle, but we'll just walk away because it doesn't matter if they take a small city because they don't have enough to invest in any large city for a siege." Which would tie their army down, and we could then starve them out.
And each time they take a city, they lose a few guys.
Exactly. So we just cut them off from their reinforcements home and let them wither on the vine. That's the Fabian strategy. It's a fantastic example.
Afterwards, the policy always was, according to Cato the Elder, Carthage must be destroyed.
Exactly.
So,
And in the
so
Third
what
War,
is
they
to
made
come?
damn sure they did, because they tore that
Oh,
fucking
they
city
did.
apart and then salted its farmlands.
So what is to come? What is to come? Officially, there is no longer a war in Germania. The Empire's already won. Various
Right.
dreams of bringing civilization, but Arminius is encouraging him to send taxes all across Germania Magna, meting out Roman justice, building roads and infrastructure to turn the locals against him, because it's already corrupting the land. It is already riling up the werewolves.
Which is an interesting take
Right.
on Varys
Uh,
fucking up managing them.
Right. I love this. It's a fantastic nod to the fact that Varys was not a great administrator. He
was
really
hard
was
on
not.
taxes. He also, funnily enough, this is very similar to one of the social wars, where one of the dudes legitimately pissed off the Etruscans by getting pissy that their depiction of the god Pluto was the original Orcus, and he fucking
Right.
attacked their
It's
priests.
right. There's a lot of mistakes that Varys makes that you can say this about Varys. Varys was a genuinely a Roman citizen and of like the patrician class and had his values and all this. He also was not what you would call the smartest tool in the shed and had really survived like everything to this point because he never really got on anyone's bad side. He was sort of overlooked. Which
Until here.
does not exactly until this. He's given this because he's to Augustus politically reliable, did nothing wrong in the East to piss off people, because quite frankly, he was more used to that civilized land that had no problems with like, all right, it's another empire, same old thing, we pay them the taxes, they leave us alone. This is a land that has not had that before, and assigning Varus to it results in a disaster.
Yeah, because the
I realized that.
Germans less organized overall than the Celts, in the sense that large states were not really a
Well,
thing.
Well, no. Remember, Varus cuts his teeth over in like Syria.
Which is well
So
known for its taxes
Which
and
is
tyrants.
well, hold on. I have a great idea. What if Varus was in charge of Palestine?
oh god, it probably wouldn't have ended up
He would
terribly,
have been
but it wouldn't
killed
have
by a
ended up good
Sicarius.
either.
He would have somehow pissed off
Probably
the
yes.
he would have pissed off the locals and gotten killed by a Sicarius, and then the great forced exodus would have happened.
Imagine a Sicarius from a Sicarius who was formerly a carpenter.
Oh no. The dark irony is it is the one who was deemed to be the one to betray the Messiah. Judas himself probably would have fucking killed him. Because remember, he was a Sicarius, at least in some
Yeah.
depictions.
So
That's where the term
but
Iscariot came from.
Yes, Iscariot basically means carrying of some either from a certain town
Yeah.
or related to the act of carrying a dagger and or using a dagger in some way.
So, oh god,
So
imagine that
Judas was a
alternate
tax
Bible.
collector, but they never really say what it meant.
Oh god, imagine
Like
in the alternate Bible where Judas kills Varys.
It's one of those fun things that people forget about this is like a lot of the titles for the apostles is like later on.
Yeah.
So we have Judas mentioned as a tax collector. That's almost entirely, in my opinion, a way to indicate to everybody in the audience that this is not a good dude.
Because
He
usury
sucks.
was a sin.
Tax
collecting is seen as partially working with finances.
Right.
Wait, I find that incredible. Well, first of all, that even in a Jewish society,
they don't like taxes.
Oh god, no.
Nobody likes taxes. That's just how it is. But it's your price you pay to not get stabbed by someone in the street every day.
So,
that's just how it works.
Yeah. So back though onto the story. So as everyone knows who's ever played a 4X strategy game, raising taxes increases provincial revolt.
It increases unhappiness, and
and you get your riots.
Varys completely misreads what this land is like.
Yeah.
He looks at this and he's like, "This is more like Gaul, right? It's not like Gaul. This is like Gaul before the Romans talked to Gaul." I know I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry.
This is like Gaul in the time of like when they sacked Rome, where they were far less organized.
This is Gaul at the time when Caesar is not even born yet. This is Gaul before Gaul got the ideas with like a long period of contact with the Romans that they became to some degree Latinized in the southern areas of Gaul
This is the
because it was
Gaul
a
of
big
like
trading thing.
this is the Gaul of like 300 BC.
This is the Gaul of the Punic Wars, where they are useful mercenaries, but they really don't like this whole Roman thing going on there, and they'd rather avoid it.
And
This
so,
is not the Gaul of 30 years ago when Caesar comes in and takes over everything. This is a very different landscape, and Varus has zero idea what he's walking into.
Oh, you forget the
and he
other part
fucks
that
it
he
all
does.
up.
thankfully though, Arminius is there to tell
To
Varus
help him out.
the
Tell him
news. The Chauciite tribe has turned against Rome and advises to send all of his forces there without delay,
Well, you
sending
forget the other thing he
32,000
did.
men straight into a trap.
You forget the other thing he did. Like, this is the even funnier thing. See, remember, he's also a proper Roman, and he wants to Romanize them. What better way than to look at their sacred places, which in traditional German culture was to be unworked because they are the natural places the gods have stepped on. Take those, fucking bulldoze them, and build temples on them.
It'll be perfect. Like basically, Arminius is telling Varus everything wrong and told him to do it, and Varus is like, "That sounds legit. That sounds great." And this is, by the way, while there's other German chiefs who are friendly to Rome, telling Varus that no, this dude does not like you. This dude is trying to get you fucking killed. Don't listen to him.
He's
But
a war hero.
Because he's a
war
Roman
hero.
citizen.
And
Because
so,
he's a Roman citizen, Arminius unironically gets these guys killed as troublemakers. I want to know the 5D chess this man was playing here. It's really impressive. And again, a lot of this is because Varus has zero idea what the fucking actual situation is, and is not exactly a smart enough dude to like step back and go like, "Hey, maybe I should grab some guys from neighboring Gaul to be my administrators, not the local, not like the locals immediately." That'd be
yeah.
I mean, it worked fine for him in
fuck
Syria.
up. In any case,
And
part
so-
of it is also that.
And so here's what happens as the Romans are walking through deep, dark forests of Teutoburg, they start hearing growling. They start seeing giant shapes moving in the shadows. And nearly all the tribes, Basilian and Werewolf, launch on them. It is a massacre. The formations fall apart. The unity is shattered. The Aquilae was attacked.
Yes, they're taken. I want to stress this about this whole situation, and when it kind of comes into like the actual historical battle. Basically put, Arminius tells Varus that there's a wonderful place that you can set down for a fort, and I know the exact route to get there. And he's fucking lying the entire time. So he knows two things. He knows everything about the Roman armies is that if they fight in formation, we're not winning. We're not as skilled in fighting in a formation battle as they are. A large set piece engagement is to our disadvantage. We're not as well drilled. We won't endure as long as they will, because that's one of the big famous things about the Roman legions is that they were very able to rotate in troops in the middle of battle. And you might think that sounds like not a very difficult thing. No, in the ancient world, that's incredibly difficult to do. The Romans became masters of this, and that's part of the reason why they're able to win engagements with a lot of other city-states, including like the Macedonians, is that they're able to cycle units around the battlefield in ways that other powers really weren't able to do at the time that they were facing, because they weren't either as organized or as disciplined. It's a huge factor in how they win. Is that it's like, okay, yeah, that troop of Romans that you sort of managed to get to pull back, yeah, that's a victory, and then there's another fresh unit of Romans right behind them that the other group flows around and reforms behind them to go rest, repair, like get cleaned up, get stitched up as best they can in the few hours that this other unit's going to be holding you, and then they're back in the fight too. That's fucking horrifying for someone like the Germans who don't fight that way. So stretched out as they are along this path, that's the other issue too, right? This entire big column of 3 legions, which is roughly 20,000 strong of soldiers, plus another probably 40,000
auxiliaries.
No, about 40,000 camp followers, mule drivers, general assorted support formations that are just like they follow an army no matter where they are. So you've got all of those people mixed in there with that can't actually fight and aren't expected to fight. So the second that the Romans run into the first block, which is that Armenia basically has the tribes ahead of them, they just put logs on the road. It's not that complicated. They put logs on the road and they burns and brambles, and it's like that's going to steal them, which is stretched out a long distance because there's a bunch of people. And then that's when the massacre really starts, is once they hit that forward bit, they come in from the sides, and at that point, there's no organization. The units that do organize end up getting slaughtered because they have no support and they're a lone formation. The survivors are stragglers. Varus kills himself, by the way.
Yep.
Rather than face, which is the standard for Roman commanders at this time. The Romans don't really have a taboo against suicide in the same way that modern people do. They consider it an honorable exit in a situation where there's no other forgiveness.
And it was also a way to escape being bandied about as a chip. Which would be even more disgraceful.
Right.
And the result of which the Aratha and the Germani, they go wild.
So here's
Roman
what the
sympathizers
Achille do,
are just
by the
murdered.
way. The Achille, those totems, are actually the sole thing that allow normal humans and the wolf-blooded to weather the lunacy. They got attacked early, and after that, the Legion shattered because, the instinctual fear of a thing like this coming at you. This art is...
And plus, you're under ambush in marching formation.
Like, scroll onto the image. Just look at that. You have a shirtless dude fighting a Roman legionary, all while there is a giant wolf-sized human with a sword and blood in its mouth. I'm running. I'm shitting my pants.
Especially since now the only thing keeping you together, those Aquila and the rituals that you did to foment and augur victories have failed you.
Right, you didn't even get to do that. That's the other thing. Like, all those preparations and rituals and things like that would convince the Romans that we're winning this battle.
Nope, they stole them.
That's not happened. That hasn't happened at all. You're under ambush. You have no idea what's going on in the other parts of the column, as people are like running away and running back and saying, no, they've attacked us here. Behind you, the other part of the column is also being attacked, and they're panicking and they're running around, and you start to get the idea that once the panic sets in for these legions, it's basically over.
Especially since you're on the only visible part of anything. This road, the rest around you is dark, forbidding wood.
It's wood, and worse, Arminius leads them into the middle of a marshland.
Swampy woods.
It's woods where it's like half of it looks like normal woods, half of it looks like normal woods, but if you step wrong, you end up in water, and you might end up in a bog, and you might drown as you're running away because you.
And don't forget, as the battles withdraw at night, you hear screaming, and you see psychotic people, pretty much near naked, painted pitch black with coal, eyes bugged out with swords, because that's something the Germans also did. They were known as shadow warriors.
Yeah. Also, the people that are surviving, they're dragging them these groves and they're nailing them to trees. That's the other thing. The psychological impact. The Romans find some of these groves from after the battle. The survivors that they were captured, a lot of these people were ritually sacrificed as an honor to the gods for granting this amazing victory over Rome. Which, that sounds great from the German perspective. From the Roman perspective, this is, that whole thing about walking around a tree with your entrails dragged out? They did that to them. They nailed their heads to trees as well. They'd grab giant spikes. They'd hold someone there, and they just ram that shit through the head. Spike him right to the tree, the sacred tree to Donar, because obviously this is what he wants. This is his sacrifice. This is his reward for helping us.
By the way, the other thing that's really fitting, Teutoburg, in Germanic tradition, was near several important holy places to Donor.
Yes. So this is
and
basically what was happening was there's a bunch of these big oak trees where if you were a Roman soldier after the battle that is coming to see these places that during the reprisal campaigns that we'll get into, that you're seeing the aftermath of like 3 years worth of rotted bodies hanging from trees. Some hung,
and
some are spiked to the trees, some are basically crucified
and
on
I think
these.
it is so devastating. We can still find relics from this time period, just
Yeah.
scattered in the
Yes.
forest.
Yeah. The amount of men that ran away and were caught and died just trying to escape is insane. Because remember, this is like 60,000 people roughly that are killed within a matter of like days.
3 days
3 days.
4 days actually,
The
because
few
that's the
or
fourth
4.
day was when Varys killed himself.
like they are on the run in the forest with no idea where they're going, absolutely terrified, with the few survivors being those that are lucky enough to either have horses and be able to escape, or just random chance gives them the ability to strip their armor off and just run, find someone that's remotely friendly to roam, who then gives them something to survive on, and they keep running, and they don't stop running until they reach the border and get into
And
Gaul.
until they can find somebody who looks Roman, somebody who is not going to kill them.
Right,
By
and
the
that's how the
way,
story gets out.
after the crushing, the uprising, which
Right.
even in our reality was violent and bloody, since quite a few tribes only faked loyalty as federati.
Yeah,
In the
it's also
setting,
that
the Uratha, given the opportunity, because there's a lot of it, they go completely psychotic hunting themselves,
Not
humans,
just the Romans.
spirits, Roman spirits, German spirits. It doesn't matter.
and I want to stress this, a lot of these tribes are actually that rise up are the ones that didn't pick a side, right? They were waiting to see what would happen. And the second that Arminius delivers the victory he's promised, it's like, well, okay, all right, this guy has the right idea. We're going to back him. We're going to go and follow him. Because they already had grudges against both sides. And it's just like, all right, this side looks like it's winning. We're throwing in as opportunistically as possible. That's human nature. 101. So the results are an absolute fucking bloodbath along the entire border region with what's basically now France.
And this now also affects the Hissel.
Oh, and
The
also I
amount of
should
death in Teutoburg Forest, creating a massive wound, becoming known as Nachtenberg, the Hill of Bones, where vengeful Roman spirits
because
linger.
again, as said before,
Wait, it's
they
called
grabbed
Nockenberg?
people, they dragged the basically the night forest because
Yeah, the Night
or the
Woods.
night city. It's because
Night
like
City.
this is a fucking horrendous place of death. There's no other way to describe it. It's like the bodies that were brought here. It's not just the dead and the living that were sacrificed. Like the dead were also basically brought in and put on like these stands as a sign of power and a sign of
Quite a few
authority.
of the Uratha, when their physical bodies were slain, got back up as spirits, refusing to be destroyed.
Right. This
And
is a
then they were.
horrific event of like panic, terror, and everything else, which is emotionally resonant among the werewolves. This is the same reason why I say like the Red Zone in France would be a fantastic campaign for Werewolf. Because this is a place of like millions dying in that situation, in
Oh
incredibly
God.
traumatic and like
Whoa.
No,
like the
imagine you're just kind of going on a tour as mortals, and then you kind of explore a little ridge area, and then you just begin hearing air raid siren, like little horns, the warning of
the
a
fucking
bombing run,
sirens for the gas attacks. Yeah, like that's
and
where
you
I'm kind of getting
distantly
at.
hear like muttering
Nash,
or
yes.
hymns of the Internationale from bitter French soldiers who died there.
You're right.
W-
That's where I'm kind of getting at. This is that sort of location. The amount of emotional trauma in this area is enough to impact the spirit world. Because these spirits that come in are the ones that will feast on human emotions that are like terror and fear and the association of death and decay and things like that. And these spirits love, remember this, spirits aren't necessarily evil. They're not bad at all. A spirit of joy is a great thing. It'll bring joy. It'll also cause addicts to overdose because they're chasing that high
Or
again and again and
alternatively,
again.
mania. which can result in just the happiest person in the world suddenly snapping into a rage and, killing their wife.
Right. That's the
Manic
point,
mania
though.
is happiness as well as rage.
Yeah, that's the thing about like when I talk about like the spirit world with werewolf is it's like there's a balancing act that has to be done, and places like this are when that balance goes completely off the rails.
And
There's no more balance. It's awful. It's terrible.
and of course, there's then Rome's response.
Rome's response
It's
is
not
very
done with
direct.
Augustus. Augustus will die in 14
Yeah, Augustus
CE.
dies after this, and
Yeah.
this is while Augustus is the great story is that Augustus for the next week has a breakdown where he is raging at this man he trusted that failed him utterly in a way that no other Roman commander has done since the time of the Punic Wars.
He was
I wanna
raging
note that.
and screaming.
Hold on.
This is where the quote, Varus, give me back my legions, Varus.
Where
where they come
Augustus
from.
lost his mind screaming at a dead man. That's the story. I don't know how true it is, but it's a fantastic story that is often used to display like the
Wait,
nature
I
of this
could
disaster.
believe it. No, I could
I have
believe
I have a
because this is like one of
I
the
have a
only
good
times
idea.
he failed.
Yeah. Wait, I have a good
Right.
idea for what, especially in Chronicles of Darkness, he was actually screaming at a dead man. He
The
brought him
ghost
back.
of Varus.
That's
the
not
ghost
likely.
of
Or-
Varus.
Araminus would have probably sacrificed his ghost to Donor.
Or perhaps because the Aquila is gone, Augustus sees werewolves.
Remember,
That's also what I'm
Requiem,
thinking, because
he's
yeah.
not touched by vampires. Vampires keep a healthy distance away from Augustus.
It's
Even
because
in,
he's Wolfkin.
like, and this is because he's Wolfkin. But you could argue like both ways. It's fun. The
also
point being though
remember,
that after
he's
this,
framing himself almost in a demented way as the husband to the Magna Mater in a way, the father of Rome,
right,
the Magna Mater. He could
right.
be
Now
embraced
this is
by
where we get
the
into the fun.
corrupt
Yeah,
city.
but with his death, Tiberius ascends the throne.
Tiberius ascends the throne,
he
and
will
Tiberius is
spend-
the least wanted person. Because I want to remind you this: Augustus dies after all of his prospective heirs, but basically Tiberius, have also died. This is despite Augustus being the most sickly individual on the goddamn planet, with more near-death scares than possibly any other leader of Rome. It's kind of insane that he lived to be basically, what was it, like 85? Like, the man should have died about a dozen times before that, but just sort of pulled through despite everyone else in his family dying.
You know what I just
It's
darkly
kind of a
realized?
miracle.
If you think about it, this is actually going back to fantasy. I mentioned Lord of the Rings. This is my little Song of Ice and Fire plug. Augustus, if you think about it, is very much like J. Harry's the Conciliator. His own heirs he outlived. And he was...
Right, he outlived basically all of them. Yeah. And so he has to pick this random-ass nephew of his, which is Tiberius. And Tiberius, I want to note this, Tiberius has zero interest in being emperor. Tiberius doesn't want to deal with that shit. So he basically hands it off to other people. This is where Sejanus gets all this power and all that. Basically, he goes to Germanicus, and Germanicus is, I think if I remember correctly, his own nephew there. And Germanicus is beloved by the legions. Germanicus, at this point, was not known as Germanicus. His like given name was Drusus, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Which also is where we get Saint Drusus from Dark Heresy from, by the way. Because he does a similar feat. The Drusus basically goes and is tasked with, all right, so we just suffered the worst defeat in Roman history. We are going to go and paint Magna Germania in blood. And boy, does Germanicus deliver.
8 legions.
8 legions go into Germany at this point.
And not just
that. And it is a slaughter.
No, it's not just that. In this setting, the werewolves have gone psychotic because the loss of the Aquila drove them fuck-raging mad too.
Right. And I want to note this. Germanicus loses legions in this fight. Germanicus 100% had a better KD ratio than would be expected. The amount of carnage that Germanicus causes basically pacifies the border for the next 3 generations or so. It's fucking insane. When we're talking about this campaign from like a perspective of historical, it's one of the most important campaigns in Roman history because the amount of carnage, bloodshed, heroism, just everything that happens and is poured into this basically secures the Roman border for the next generation or
Yeah,
so.
the Lime's border stays pretty much stable from this point onward.
Because I want to note this. Before this, there were German attempts to siege the fort lines along the river. Arminius himself, I think, dies in one of these sieges.
Oh no, what's even more fucked up is he outlived his wife, who was pregnant with a kid. By the way, Germanicus intentionally gets her, and it's rumored she goes to
And
Rome,
drags
but
her
her
back to
body was
Rome.
never found.
Right, like he probably sold her into fucking slavery and she dies God knows where. Like that's the point of this. This is not an expedition of like conquest. That was never the intention of this expedition. This is an expedition of Rome when Rome was like, we just want to punish these people.
Not just
We
punish,
want to make an
we are
example.
going to
What they did-
destroy them
what-
as a concept.
Right.
As
This
they
is an
did to the
extermination campaign. And
I believe-
it
I
fails
believe-
on that
I bel-
objective.
Yeah,
But it
I believe
succeeds.
that like even there's possibility that Caesar's rampage across Gaul counts as a genocide.
It's arguable.
It's arguable, and the Germanicus
This is
campaign
their
sure
attempt
as
to do
hell
it again.
is.
The Germanicus campaign is basically an attempted genocide of everyone that's on the other side of the river. Like the Romans want to make a fucking example that they are not to be trifled with. That this 3 legions, oh, that's a great accomplishment. That's great. Here's 8. Here's 8 that are prepared and ready for you.
And we have
and
more
they are
of
not
them.
stopping
You
until
lost one, we lost
everything
another
is
one?
burning.
You burned through one of our legions. We have 7 more, and we have 2 more coming in. And we're not stopping until we basically clear every
Until
village.
we feel we are done.
And what do you think this does to the Hissel? It's already sickened and corrupted by the machinations of Varius, the violence of Arminius, and now you have the revenge of the Magna Mater. And it's a search for the Aquilae.
Oh, and by the way, the best part about this, in the werewolf setting, since we're going back into that, they actually one of the first fights they have to do is to pacify and break the Noctenburg. They fight the wound directly and actually fucking win.
Right. And I want to note this. The fight goes on for years. And it's not a full win. The Romans have to pull out because it's awful. It's bloody. There's a lot that happened. It's a fucking nightmare campaign. But Germanicus gets back with most of his troops. That's huge. And the other big thing about this is that 10 legions go into fucking Germania. I think they lose 2 more, but they recover the Aquillas. They keep them. That's the big key. For the Roman legions, this is a huge campaign that basically says, hey, we're not defeated. This was a fluke. This was something that would never happen normally to us, and we've just proved it. That's huge.
There's 2 factors for why it ends early. The first is a very harsh winter was augured and predicted, and it was harsh. The second and more likely one, Tiberius by this point has been forced to be emperor for quite a while. And Drusus, think about how much plaudit and triumph and glory he won
If
doing
Drusus
this.
returns, he may well be another Caesar.
Drusus basically at this point has won the accolades and like the respect of multiple legions. And that's not a small thing to say. Like, for these men, Drusus was there fighting with besides them in some of these horrific battles at night when everything around them seems like it's going to fail. And if they don't stand and fight, they all die. That's the basics. And Drusus is there fighting and is winning with them. That's the other key thing. He's very reminiscent of Caesar himself in that way. It's like everything's fighting and we're kind of looking at this and going, it's fucking over.
Also, if you're wondering why him having the loyalty of multiple legions is concerning, an excellent example of this is more than one emperor legitimately became emperor just with the loyalty of one legion. Just one. Or
Right,
has
and it
caused
goes
serious
further than that in this
rebellions.
case, but it goes further than that in this case. So when Drusus comes back, Tiberius has a problem on his hands. Tiberius is very worried that if Drusus gets it in his head to be emperor, he's going to be emperor. So he sends him to Asia to just do nothing, basically. Prepare a campaign against Parthia. I'll tell you when to start whenever. And of course the point is that Tiberius is never going to tell him to go into Parthia. That's stupid. So he's just supposed to be there twiddling his thumbs until Tiberius figures out a better thing to do with him,
Oh no, he's
or until
dead.
most of the memories of his actual accomplishments fade. And then, oh no, he's dead. A lot of people like to say that Tiberius had him poisoned. I actually don't think that's the case.
Just
I think
died.
he just got sick and died.
He could have died
It's
of
just one of
something
those
silly
random
like
incidents of
appendicitis or
history.
something.
Yeah,
Then
there's a
again,
lot of ways you can just McFucking die.
there
And
is rumor that Tiberius killed most of his family.
there is that rumor. I don't 100% believe it. Tiberius was was by no means a forgiving emperor. He was happy to purge his political enemies. I just do not see him killing Drusus. I think that he 100% understood that Drusus is his prospective heir, and it's important that people have respect for him. Otherwise, why would he have sent him? I think that this is also why he then brings Caligula directly to be with him, is because he wants influence over the next heir that he's got this opportunity.
And if you've ever seen the movie Caligula, you'll know how that turns out.
Speaking
Right.
of
And this is
Caligula,
also where Caligula gets his name.
Mhm.
Caligula gets his name Little Boots because I want to note this. The soldiers absolutely loved Drusus and they adored Caligula. Because Caligula they made him a little outfit that looked like a Roman legionary because of course he would follow his father everywhere when he's on patrol. So some soldiers made Caligula little marching boots and a little centurion's outfit basically for him to wear.
Ah,
And
little
so they started
boots.
calling him Little Boots because
Do your
he's
dance for me.
wearing these little boots and he's running around being a cute little kid. So
speaking
the
of
legionaries love
insanity,
him because he's
because Caligula, while he is relevant since he was around during this time, uh, yeah, remember Araminus and his compact? They come back to what the fuck Rome did to their lands, and oh, oh,
Well,
they murdered
the
him.
yes, a dream of a unified Germania goes unfulfilled for about the
There's
next 1,800 years.
there's a lot of discussion about how Arminius died. The general story is oh, he dies ambushed and killed by other tribes. There's other stories and accounts that say he died in fighting the Romans, basically along the borderland. He was dead before Drusus even arrived. Both are viable. I think personally, it's very likely that he just died in one of the random many skirmishes that were happening during this period along the border.
I wouldn't be surprised. It
Completely
got really
unknown.
bloody.
Yeah, completely unknown. Just random carnage of this era was insane.
But among the
Uh,
Uratha, to give you an idea, imagine, if you will, you and your pack, you're in your tribal pack, come back to your homestead. Your entire bloodline, your entire Wolfkin clan is dead. Dozens of people
everything's dead.
gone. The
Everything's
spirits
different.
that you venerated, eaten or destroyed. What's left? Probably a skeleton monster that basically represents the death of your family, claiming to be them wearing its skin. A lot of things like
Yeah.
that.
And I want to talk about this. It's fantastic where they go then to go and say all right, what's the legacy of all this? Which is the Aquila get recovered over the next couple of decades. The last one supposedly in 41 CE, though authenticity is debatable. By this point, I would not have been shocked if there was just an Aquila laying around on one of these sites around Tottenberg, where the Germans had forgot about it. It had been bypassed by that, and it's never been used since the battles around this era about 30 years ago. Because why would you go back there? That's a place of death and pain. You don't go back to that sort of sacred site again. the gods have obviously abandoned it, so why go back? And then some like legionary patrol discovers it and drags it back. I know there's some people that say that's complete bullshit. I think it's very possible.
And as for what it does to the werewolves, it essentially makes them, because both were essentially corrupted by their wolfkin, at least in what they believe. This is their kind of copium. They come to the conclusion that to fight the wars of men is not their nature. Those among the Swebos, the Germans, they break. They leave that element behind. Among the Romans, it turns a bit uglier. As in, an actual civil war among them happens later on.
Right. There, after Tiberius and after Caligula, there's
Is
a
it
lot
Nero?
of shit happening. Remember that after Caligula, you get
Oh, no,
Claudius.
it's Claudius. And then
Claudius is
is
fantastic.
but he's the end of the Julian dynasty.
I want to note this. It becomes known as the Judeo-Claudian dynasty because Claudius is just such a good ruler.
Mm-hmm.
He's just flat out that good of a leader, despite being this stuttering kind of secondary person that, like, Tiberius is like, he's never going to amount to anything. I don't care about him. And Caligula is like, he's just weird. Claudius, what does he do? Like, he's just around the palace occasionally. And it's just random chance that gets Claudius in position of power, and Claudius 100% lives up to the expectations and goes beyond that. I like Claudius as a historical figure. He's fascinating.
By the way, one of the funny things is they have a weird aside about a certain mustache man, one bald artist vegetarian meth addict.
Oh yeah, no. The whole thing about this is that the legacy of this victory and the legacy of these fights is later on is that this becomes a rallying cry for German nationalism in the 20th century and the 19th century as well, of like that we were this great united people that destroyed Rome and all that. That's actually where a lot of the statues of Armenius come from, is around this era, and there's some tainted associations there to this day.
Yep, because the funny mustache man. There's also the dark irony that the funny mustache man adopted so much Roman elements too, like the eagle, the lightning bolts, and the salute.
The eagle. The Roman salute is actually not Roman at all. It's a complete LARP from the fucking Mussolini era. Wasn't actually used by the
but
Romans
it's still
at all.
funny that they borrowed from Italy.
It is, but that's kind of how it goes. It's
But it also leads to a really fun, if you want to do this with an Indiana Jones, you could do this with an Indiana Jones adventure. Indiana Jones and the Third Aquila.
the Lost Aquila. Yeah, like just go for it. Just fucking go for it. You're a group of weird
And
hunters
it
or
could
like
lead to
Task
the
Force
fun.
Valkyrie.
No, it could lead to the fun comedy of you then have the Society of, like the original Society of Phil when they were still neo-Nazis, and then you have like a bunch of goofy black shirts like trying to get into arguments because they're the true legacy of Rome. So you have the two fascist groups actually fighting over this lost Aquila. And throughout it all, there is you could also add like a werewolf complication because this Aquila is bad mojo, still corrupted with shards of the Magna Mater.
Yeah. Oh, that also leads into a really fun bit. And then when I say fun bit, I do mean fun bit, where you could easily do a Task Force Valkyrie campaign set in the 1940s, where your objective is to go and steal this legionary eagle back as a small random group of people, Delta Green style. Actually, bring this into Delta Green. It'd be really fun.
Oh yeah, especially since you have the alien Sibylline as like a tied element. You could borrow the cosmology from this. And have it be like a little finger of the Magna Mater, which is this eldritch fertility deity.
or whatever.
Especially because of the spirits.
Yeah. And it's like Shub-Niggurath artifacts and all. You could have a lot of fun.
Well, they outright
also
say,
include the Noctenberg. Include like this
Yeah.
part of the woods which is actually eldritch, like that still remembers the Battle of Teutoburg.
Well, they do give the name of the Idigam, Shar Zagub.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep, very Lovecraftian. Hid from the earth in the Magna Mater realm, the worlds accepted the new order, as they believed it was a necessary part of its near demise and reformation.
This is also a slight
I do like the
love
term
letter
that they
to
called
the
an
worm.
Earthbound.
It's also a slight love letter to
the
worm.
Earthbound. using the term Earthbound, that I feel like that's a Demon the Fallen reference.
It
It's
likely
slightly,
is.
yes. I do like, though, if we're going to go through that, there's a lot of detail. We're not going to go too deep into it because we want you to buy this. This is really good. Go out and get
This
it.
is
Go out
Dark
and read
Era's
it.
Companion. Strongly recommend. This is also the one that had the last period where Egypt was remotely like the IRM of old.
It also, unfortunately, has Era of Beast.
It does.
But
Yeah.
you take the good with the bad.
You can buy them separately, if I remember.
Yes, you can.
And this one I strongly recommend.
In any case, the first thing they do in the next page is they reference immediately Requiem for Rome. Go get it. Go play it if you want to do a vampire in this era.
Yeah, the Legion of the Damned.
They have the fun stuff. They have the fun stuff with this. They mentioned the Sin Eaters as very much a thing that could be involved in this campaign with the amount of death and bloodshed going on.
Well, they also
Is
say
that being a group of,
Prometheans
like,
as well.
Yes, being a group of random Sin Eater soldiers, where you're basically the elements of of Drusus's Legion that got left behind, and well, guess what? Your ghosts are. They're the dead from Teutoniburg, and that's a nice healthy bit of trauma as you're trying to make your way back to civilization.
I got something more fucked up because of how violent Teutoburg is. You're a Sin Eater whose ghost is actually a botched hybrid between two, because they were partially torn apart during the battle by the wolves, and they fused into one confused entity. It's still a ghost, but
very much possible.
blended.
They of course talk about mummies, because, well, you got the Fall of Assyrian, which is just before this.
You have the Hunters.
Hunters are
the
fun.
Termini Calais. Demon they bring up as possibly trying to explore the rumor of Carthage.
Yeah,
claiming that it is
they did a
hell on
Bruja
earth.
reference.
That's fun. They did
Although-
a Bruja reference in a fun way.
Although I do like this as an idea. Probably a few decades later, Demon and Hunter, Jerusalem,
That could be fun.
where you have essentially demons setting up their stigmatic hunter groups as they go off and kill the other false messiahs.
Oh, that could be fun, where they hijack another cult that gets eventually wiped out by Christianity.
Well, no, it was more thinking of, because at this period
There were
it
several,
was
like
sort of considered
Luciferians.
end times in Judaism, that there was going to be an army of light
Luciferians,
versus an army of
Essenes.
dark.
They reference another one. Bar Abbas was
Yep.
one of the many Messiah claimants.
So you would have these Messiah claimants, and of course they're the real Messiah. Everyone else must be a false Messiah. They are not claiming to restore Jerusalem.
By the way, they do
All the
reference
while, the
Beast.
demons are using this. Yeah.
They do reference
Well,
Beast,
actually,
you could. Here's a fun idea for Beast, even though
It
they
kind
suck.
of works here.
No, it also works. Imagine Beast during Sulla's dictatorship period, where you're basically trying to get rid of as many of your political enemies as possible, and essentially fuck around with the crisis
I do like this.
through more power.
Yeah. The Roman emperors are beast enough for Rome. Being more powerful, more charismatic, more dangerous than the emperor is likely to get you sent to exile, if not killed.
And more than one has learned this the hard way, which is great.
It's great.
The Roman emperors are too terrifying for beasts.
Which is
awesome.
fantastic. I love the art on the next page, 2 pages later, because again, the details for like all this, the mix here of the Aquila, you've got the skeletal stuff, you got this weird spirit thing, and then of course the legionaries themselves, which are possessed.
You also see a few dead legionaries too.
It's this weird, like faded, vaguely humanoid-looking artwork that they really do well with.
They do this sort of artwork is really good. The Legion of the Damned they have to reference, which is the talk about, if you remember Requiem for Rome, that was one of the factions, the Mortuary Legion. That's these guys, the group of vampires that follow the legions, and they'll feed off the dead and the dying on the battlefields. They'll scavenge that at night, which is kind of a fun concept to play with.
By the way, they also reference, because we're not going fully ahead, they also reference the river's curse, a the Rhine itself is a font of darkness for both of them. If you're Roman
Yes,
and
it
you
has a
cross it,
very
you're
strong
scared.
spirit. Yeah, it has a very strong spirit in it.
And a lot of it was already strong, but what happened in Germania, that reinforced it by a lot.
Exactly. The next bit is kind of great too, where they talk about like the other spirits that live around the waterways and how that starts to impact the river itself. It's fun. And then they go into the forest. The forests are great. Where they talk about like the shit that you can find in the forest this time. Where they go like, okay, so first off, these forests here are old. They're real fucking old. Like we're talking the oldest old growth on the continent at this point. To
The
a
Romans
degree
by this point chopped down most of the other regions. Or
that
worked
they
them.
have
So,
control of.
yeah.
Yes.
So what you've got here are savage feral vampires, blood drinkers who walk in the daylight hours.
Protected from the sunlight by the leaves above them. Like
Very
imagine that as like a thing that you might encounter. That's a terrifying monster.
Okay, I got something even more scary. So imagine this. You are a bunch of legions on your pacification campaigns, and you just, you laugh and dismiss the barbarian after killing him about demons in the night. And then, silently, out of nowhere, beings covered in charcoal pitch with razor-sharp teeth come silently out of the woods, and you're just barely awake. You're about to scream, and then hands stronger than even a bull wrap around your throat and pop your head off. The last thing you see before death is them feeding on your sleeping men.
or this.
Silently.
You are a vampire from Rome, following these legions. But
And now you're meeting the other vampires that
well,
live here.
here's how you meet them. You wake up at night ready to feed on the men.
And
God,
they're all
They're all
fucking
dead,
dead.
drained of blood.
God, imagine I'm envisioning like this horrifying Nosferatu bloodline that just comes out of the woods. They look like gnarled woses almost, wildmen. They
Oh,
look
that
almost
is.
tree-like when they're not moving, and then they strike.
Oh, that's. Oh, that
Oh.
is.
Then there's the
Oh,
next bit, which I love,
yeah.
is the idea of demons in these forests. These forests are infrastructure. The god machine is related to these forests, and it's running plans through them that you don't understand. There's these creatures of wooden things made of clockwork flesh and wood
Oh, yeah. Imagine
moving
if
in
you
the darkness.
Oh no!
wait. Imagine if you chop
God.
down a tree, and the axe. So what happens? The axe hits. It's stuck, and as you
You
pull it
look in
out,
there, it's
yeah,
brass underneath the bark.
it's clockwork, and you hear ticking. It's
No, you don't hear ticking. You hear a heartbeat, a deep.
Right.
oh,
Oh,
I
and
love
then
the other bit they
out
talk
when
of the
about.
tree
something
line.
moves in the
No, and
forest.
then out of the tree line, it's almost man-like in structure. It looks like it is made out of wicker. Inside are glowing lights, and you hear whispers in male, female, and children's voices. It has no face. As
They
it
also, of
just
course, go into
goes towards you as your eyes bleed.
They also go into like the talk about the Fae, and the Fae are deeply nestled in this area.
Oh
And
God!
if you go
Oh no!
missing,
You're part of like a century. You're part of the 80-man group. You're walking, and then all of a sudden you get lost. The forest gets darker, and you have no idea how to get out of it. The road is gone.
it's the
Congrat-
thorn, it's the hedge. You're in
yeah.
the hedge, and
Oh,
it's just
And by
all
the
from
end
imagine.
of
there.
it, there's only a
Wait, wait.
couple of you left as you desperately
Ima-
escape.
I get one of the things I'd like with Changeling the Lost is perhaps that time difference. You were
The
part of
general limit is 100 years before
a
you've
hundred
lost
years,
all connection with
Oh
like
God! Here's my idea.
reality.
You're
but
part of
you come from the
Germanicus.
Roman Republic and you're in the Roman Empire,
Oh no
or
no no no! I got something
uh,
better. Imagine you're part of that century, and you were hanging out with Germanicus, like Drusus and Little Boots, like the little kid. He's so cute. You come back, you find, oh hey, Little Boots became emperor, and he's crazy. He's gone completely fucking nuts. This little
And of
kid
course,
that you had on your knee that you made little uniforms for, he's completely crazy. He has a horse as a senator. He's randomly killing people. Fucking nuts.
all the while there is a man claiming to have your name right by his side, and you can look at him and you can tell it is wearing a face. Beneath it is something wooden, something inorganic, inhuman.
Right. They also give you rules to play pure, which is kind of great. They just throw that right out there for you. You want to play pure? Here's how you play pure.
The way they gain renown, their
Mhm.
advantages. They give a little brief on the tribes.
Yep. They also talk about how these all work at this period. It's pretty great. They talk about the various tribes that live along the border with Rome. They give examples of the armor, the weapons that were used at this time, and then they give you your sample characters.
Yep, how to play
Followed
Federati.
by
That's also really fun.
yes. Then at the end of it,
Teaching
they
war.
give you their inspirations, which of course, Requiem for Rome is the first one.
By the way, new weapons: Gladius, Pilum, the Scutum, the Sperry, and the Swerdam. Awesome.
Yes.
Lorca
They give you-
Segmentata.
Wait, I like this well. They give you legion maneuvers.
Yes.
This is awesome.
I am an entire group of werewolves fighting with each other in this formation in werewolf form.
Right. That's what they give you here is like the options for that. I would also say that the thing that they do for inspirations the best though, of course, is my personal favorite is that they add the Godfather. The book specifically,
Yeah.
which is a fantastic book. I've read it. It's pretty good. The movie's also very good, of course, but like the book is a very different experience than the movie because there's a lot that's cut out of the movie that's in the book. A lot of it's very sexual.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I do love
it's
Requiem for a Master's Godfather. Great pick. De Bello Gallico by Julius Caesar.
The Gallic Wars by Julius Caesar. Very
Perfect.
good read for understanding the Roman mindset. Of course they have Rome, the television series,
Good
because
pick.
that's just a classic at this point. This one's an interesting one, The Centurion, which is a film from 2010 about about basically the conflicts around the Scottish Highlands by the Ninth Legion. It's an interesting movie. I've only seen snippets of it. It's not terrible, just not
That's interesting.
great.
It makes sense that they probably. It does make sense they wouldn't reference Gladiator, but there's like a couple of elements, like the way they handled the corruption of Rome is very Gladiator-esque. They dream of Rome being corrupted by the emperor that replaces his father.
Oh yeah, but it's a very different sort of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And the next one that they have is fantastic.
It is the Black Death.
This is Black Death Europe for the next
One thing I would also add as an inspiration, there was a German historical series called Barbarians, which is actually about these events. It was
not that great.
Released in 2020, but still, I guess.
I saw the adaptation of it that might have been. Okay, if it's the Netflix adaptation of it, then it's garbage.
Yeah, Netflix
it completely misses like the actual. It misses like the actual nature of it. They try to make a weird analogy, and they have like Arminius being a more Roman soldier, and it just completely misses the nature of why this is such a betrayal on both sides. And tries to portray the Romans as like a conquering empire in complete nature, and well, that's correct. It also misses the fact that Arminius was a fucking traitor. Like he was a man that was 100% in it for himself in many ways.
Well, would it surprise you that this was a German production?
Not at all.
Even today, that the myth of the national ideals of Arminius still ring true.
I mean,
in
he
the
is
hearts of the
impressive.
Germans.
He did something that not many could claim. He crushed 3 legions at once. Not many can really
Yes,
claim
it
that.
was also to a degree, it was also a self-serving act because there's a lot of allegations thrown around by Roman historians that this was partially an attempt to get himself becoming a king of his people.
Which he does. He deposes his father using this.
Yeah. Yes. There was an element of self-servingness to this whole thing that Arminius does. It's an impressive feat, but it's something you have to note.
But yes, the next series in the Dark Eras is on the Black Death.
Well,
The
it's not the next
the
one we'll
apocalypse of
necessarily cover, but it is the next one in the Chronicles of Darkness Companion.
This is where it gets us the Morbus are here. It also talks about the various Prometheans before the Frankensteins.
Because there were
Which
quite a few
gives us
that
a nice...
adopted the fire aspect.
Right, and this gives us one of them, and it's a fun one. I think that this is one of the better ones of the setting because it does give us an update for a Bloodline 2E for Requiem, which we didn't get many of, and it's a very popular one that they go for. They also cover some of the other compacts, which is the Gallows Post, which isn't really talked about in the modern because they died
went the
out.
way of the dodo, yeah.
Which is one of the things I like about Requiem over Masquerade is that it shows that even the Society of the Dead has adaptation and change. As the old die, the new come in. It's just how it is. So you get like some really interesting things, and then they go into like the other ones here are pretty great. Are like the Princes of the Conquered Land, which covers Mutapa.
We've already done that.
I can't remember if we covered that already.
We did.
Yes, fantastic. I recommend that one.
It's an excellent point of view on how you can run mages in the Awakened setting without relying on meta plot bullshit and the stuff that the Western
without
traditions
relying
did.
on. Right, and it's a great example also of a piece of history that people forget about, which is that there were large kingdoms of very well organized people with their own cultures and all that in Southern Africa.
It's also really helpful to a storyteller that wants to do, say, a Mage Chronicle, but doesn't want to deal with the Atlantis myth bullshit.
Yeah, because they have a completely different view of the world than how the mages of the Diamond see the world, because they're not connected to that culture that's linked to like Alexander, remember? Which is fun. It's a great contrast. And the other ones, if I remember correctly, there is their 30 Years War setting, which is when the Horsemen rode. There's the Foreboding Lands, which is the Roanoke colony.
That one's also pretty fun and a bit of a nod to, because they did play with that in the Old World of Darkness. That's where the Croatan come from.
Yeah. Then they have... then there's Fearful Lesson, Lifting the Veil, Year Without a Summer, and the Master's Tools. I don't know if we've done the Master... Yeah, we've already done the Master's Tools. That's the one with the Russian Revolution demon. It's a fun setting.
But next week, we were thinking either Glorantha or when Lord of the Rings first went woke.
Back in the 1980s, yes.
Although there is the...
We'll probably have to...
Well, no, because what bad book is next week, Squirrel Killer asks. We're not permitted 2 nice things in a row.
That's true. We're really not. Oh,
we will have to listen. We'll cast the auguries in our fate.
We'll consult the horospecs. We'll sacrifice a sheep and we'll take a look at its liver and see what that tells us the future. Or we'll throw grain to the sacred chickens and see what happens. That was another thing they did, where they showed the patterns of the chickens on the ground and how they ate the grain could be used to tell the future, not just them eating it.
Yep, ornithomancy is a very interesting... Yeah, it's ornithomancy, the study of bird motion.
It was an incredibly common thing among the Romans for telling the future. Like
they also would have people like try to startle birds in trees to see how they flew, to see what the auspices were. Not even kidding. They had a bird disturber that would go up.
Bird disturber. You're getting paid by your local fortune teller to go throw a stick at some birds and see what happens. Like, imagine being a small child and being given like a stone and told, yeah, throw that at that tree full of birds. Which is fantastic. Being a little kid in the ancient world, if you didn't die, was kind of great in some ways. It's just like, yeah, go be a fucking nuisance to everything around you.
Yeah, we'll have to consult the
That's how we deal with the
auspexes
future.
because I wouldn't mind doing Gorgoroth because there is bad with good. There is bad with good. It has it literally depicts Nazguls with tits. I'm not even kidding.
Which is amazing. It's like I want the big dummy goth mommy. Here we go.
Well, she also had
This
cats, if I
this
remember
ring
right.
wraith got me.
If I remember right,
This
she
ring
has
wraith
a
got me
court of
thinking
black cats, or was it bats? It's one of the two.
Oh, she's also a cat lady. All right, here we go. The goth chick has been established. I'm the reason why we're all into the Roman Empire is because just like them, we want to get destroyed by goth.
I also have a bunch of old Street Fighter stuff. There's other splats they did,
Yeah,
like
they did
Secrets of
that. Yeah.
Shadowloo, The Perfect Warrior. I have those.
How is it that White Wolf accidentally made one of the best adaptations for like a fighting game of all time?
It's
How
really
the
weird.
fuck did they pull that off?
I mean,
Like when you consider the
I could always pull some because I have quite a few of the tribe books from Werewolf.
Oh yeah, we could grab something like that. There's Bone Nars, which is an infamous one for the some of the artwork in it.
I forget. Did we do? No, we didn't do Children of Gaia. We could do Phil Bricato's weird Dommy Mommy
I think we
iteration of
already
Christian.
did.
No, we didn't.
No,
That was the
did
Black
we?
Furies.
Okay, yeah, we did Black Furies. Black Furies is different than Children of Gaia because, like,
But let's save that
depending
for
on
Earth Day.
yeah, that's true. We need to save that for Earth
Okay,
Day.
Children of
That's
Gaia
our
is for
that's our
Earth
Earth
Day.
Day sacrifice.
So, yeah, we will consult the auspexes. I'm leaning towards I'm leaning towards Gorgoroth because there's a lot of weird fucking takes on the Nazgul. And we could just literally spend our time looking at that. It's so fucking weird.
Look, we can already tell you that J.R.R. Tolkien would completely approve of the big titty Nazgul, as he also signed off on the Shelob like that.
But
oh god, there's
will
also
leave
no,
that.
you forgot the other bit. Camul the Easterling wanting to fuck his evil stepmommy elf.
You know what? I think that sells it. We will be doing
truly the most based and red-pilled version of the Lord of the Rings ever created.
We will enter the halls of the lands of Gorgoroth next week.
Haha! My gambit has worked. Gorgoroth it is.
I mean,
have a good night, all.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.